Hey there, welcome to Brad Arrows. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. If these stories give you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Get cozy and let the fear take over. Anna Stalls braced herself against the sterile bathroom sink, squinting at her reflection in the mirror of her Hamburg apartment as dawn broke across the skyline. The small red bump on her forearm, seemingly just an insect bite from her humanitarian trip to Thailand 6 weeks ago, had transformed overnight into an angry, swollen lesion that throbbed with her pulse. 3 days later, as the clinic doctor removed his glasses and stared at the test results with a pore that matched the sterile walls behind him, Anna knew something was terribly wrong. Dr. Maximilian Berger, the man who had once asked for her hand in marriage before tragedy tore them apart, finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. This isn't just an infection. What's growing inside your arm shouldn't be possible in this part of the world. Hamburg's medical district glittered in the morning sunlight, its modern buildings and pristine streets painting a picture of German medical excellence. Here, among the nation's most prestigious medical institutions, Anna Stalls had built a respectable career as an epidemiologist. Her name appeared on research papers and grant proposals that earned nods of approval from colleagues twice her age. At 32, she possessed the focused intensity that came from dedicating oneself entirely to work. A dedication born not just from passion, but from necessity. Her apartment told a story her words rarely did. Minimalist and functional, with medical journals stacked neatly on her coffee table. A single framed photo captured her with her father, Hans, before Alzheimer's had stolen his memories, before his eyes would look at her with the vacant politeness of a stranger. Colleagues described Anna as brilliant and determined, but few recognized the pain she carried. 3 years ago, a nursery had been painted soft yellow in the spare bedroom of the apartment she shared with Dr. Maximilian Berger. Their wedding was postponed when Anna miscarried in her second trimester. The grief drove them apart, Maximilian unable to break through her walls of silence, Anna unable to face the future they had planned together. Their engagement ended with the quiet return of a ring and Anna's application for a position that would keep her far from the hospital where Maximilian worked. Since then, her life had developed a predictable rhythm. Work, research, brief visits with her father, and humanitarian trips that took her to remote locations where she could lose herself in helping others. Thailand had been her fourth such trip in 3 years. The mosquito bite, or what she thought was a mosquito bite, seemed such a trivial souvenir from weeks spent vaccinating children and training local health workers. The irony wasn't lost on her that Dr. Maximilian Berger now headed the infectious disease department at the University Medical Center, where her GP had referred her case. The northern Thai highlands had struck Anna as hauntingly beautiful when she first arrived 8 weeks ago. The humanitarian mission focused on several remote villages near the Burmese border, where access to medical care meant a day's journey on rough mountain roads. Anna had volunteered specifically for this assignment, drawn to its isolation and the pure focus it would demand. No reminders of Hamburg, of Maximilian, or of the life she might have had. These communities have been hit hard by seasonal illnesses. Dr. Alina Mueller, the mission coordinator, had explained during their orientation in Chiang Mai. We're bringing vaccines, antibiotics, and most importantly, education on prevention. Anna had nodded along with the other volunteers, already calculating how she would organize the data collection that might benefit her research back home. The group of 10 international medical professionals traveled in 2 weathered vans that struggled up mountain roads. Anna remembered pressing her forehead against the window, watching the landscape transform from urban sprawl to terraced farmland, to the sparse vegetation of higher elevations. Villages appeared like mirages, clusters of wooden and bamboo structures, with metal roofs that gleamed silver in the harsh sunlight. It was in the 3rd village, Ban Mi Sui, where they stayed the longest. The community had welcomed them with a simple ceremony, children presenting each volunteer with hand-woven bracelets. Anna still wore hers, the blue and red threads now frayed from constant wear. During daylight hours, they worked tirelessly, setting up a makeshift clinic in the village school, treating everything from minor infections to chronic conditions that had gone unaddressed for years. At night, the team would gather in the village square, eating communal meals prepared by local women and sleeping in tents erected alongside the school. On their 5th night in Ban Mi Sui, Anna had wandered away from the group. Sleep had become elusive, her body still adjusting to the altitude, and she found herself drawn to the quietness of the forest edge. The dense jungle stretched before her like a living, breathing entity under a sky overcrowded with stars. "You should not be here after dark, sister," a voice had startled her. Turning, Anna found a young girl standing a few feet away, her expression serious despite her youth. No more than 12, with long dark hair and eyes that seemed too wise for her age. She wore a traditional hill tribe skirt with a modern t-shirt, the kind of cultural blend Anna had noticed throughout the region. "The spirits of the forest come at night," the girl continued in careful English. "They carry bad memories." Anna had smiled, charmed by what she assumed was local superstition. "I'm a doctor," she explained gently. "Spirits don't carry memories. Insects might carry diseases." The girl, who later introduced herself as Saya, had frowned and stepped closer. "My grandmother makes a paste," she insisted, "to keep away the biting flies, the little ones you cannot see." "Sand flies," Jessica replied, recognizing the description. "Yes, they can transmit diseases." "I have repellent." Saya had shaken her head, clearly unconvinced. "Be careful," she'd said, before running back toward the lights of the settlement. Anna's journey was about to become a fight, not just for her own survival, but for a revolutionary understanding of medicine that bridged traditional knowledge and modern science. As weeks passed, the small red bump on Anna's forearm transformed from an innocuous insect bite into a medical mystery that would challenge everything she knew about infectious diseases. The University Medical Center became her new reality: sterile walls, hushed conversations, and a growing sense of medical uncertainty. Dr. Alina Mueller, head of the infectious disease department, studied Anna's test results with growing concern. "These cultures are showing something unusual," she muttered, pulling up microscopic images on her computer screen. not the standard pathogens we'd expect. Maximilian Berger entered the consultation room, his professional demeanor barely masking the personal history that lingered between him and Anna. Their past, a broken engagement, a lost pregnancy, years of unspoken pain, now condensed into this clinical space where Anna was no longer a colleague, but a patient. We need to consider options outside standard protocols, Maximilian said, his fingers tracing the edge of Anna's medical chart. Your symptoms suggest something more complex than a typical tropical infection. Anna's mind raced. As an epidemiologist, she understood the medical complexity better than most patients. The lesion on her arm had developed a distinctive crater-like center, with an angry red line tracking up towards her shoulder. Traditional antibiotics had failed. Something was deeply wrong. The village where I was working, Anna began, her mind returning to Ban Misui. There was a girl, Saya. She warned me about spirits in the forest, about biting insects that carried more than just disease. Maximilian raised an eyebrow. Folk wisdom, not just wisdom, Anna insisted. Traditional knowledge that we've systematically ignored in Western medicine. The medical board meetings became battlegrounds. Dr. Mueller presented Anna's case with clinical detachment, while pharmaceutical representatives watched with calculated interest. A new broad-spectrum antibiotic was being trialed, and Anna's case had become an unexpected test subject. We treat based on probability, Doctor. Heinrich Schmidt, the department head, explained during one tense consultation. Occam's razor suggests the simplest explanation is usually correct. But Anna knew something more complex was happening. The infection was unlike anything in standard medical textbooks. Her arm continued to deteriorate, with muscle weakness spreading to her fingers. A terrifying progression for a woman whose entire career had been built on precise scientific work. Her father, Hans Stahls, once a renowned history professor now battling Alzheimer's, provided an unexpected connection. During a rare moment of clarity at the care facility, he spoke of a Brazilian exchange student from decades ago, a similar mysterious infection that had been misunderstood by Western doctors. The jungle remembers, Hans muttered, his clouded eyes momentarily sharp. Traditional medicine knows what doctors forget. Linda Schreier, Hans's caregiver, watched these moments with a mixture of professional detachment and genuine compassion. She had become more than just a caregiver, a research assistant, a confidant, a bridge between Hans's fragmented memories and Anna's desperate search for answers. Maximilian began conducting independent research, risking his professional reputation. He reached out to colleagues in Thailand, specifically tracking down information about the remote village where Anna had been working. The email from Saya's village would become a turning point, a message that would challenge everything about Anna's understanding of medicine. Something is growing inside you that shouldn't be possible, Maximilian had said weeks earlier. Now those words echoed with increasing urgency as Anna's condition continued to evolve. The medical establishment was about to face a challenge that would force them to look beyond their conventional understanding of disease, traditional knowledge, and the complex relationship between human bodies and the environments they inhabit. Anna's journey was just beginning, a medical odyssey that would transform not just her life, but potentially the entire approach to tropical infectious diseases. The hospital's secure unit felt like a prison of white walls and clinical indifference. Anna found herself isolated, her medical autonomy systematically stripped away under the guise of careful observation. Dr. Schmidt's influence ran deep, and his connections with Westpharma, a pharmaceutical giant conducting clinical trials, seemed to cast a long shadow over her treatment. "We're protecting you from yourself," Patricia Weber, the hospital's administrative director, explained with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. The security personnel who accompanied her felt like an unnecessary show of force, a clear message that Anna's professional credentials meant nothing within these walls. Late one night, as the hospital settled into its quiet rhythm, Anna managed to access her medical records. The lab results told a story of deliberate obfuscation. Markers consistent with a parasitic infection had been dismissed as anomalies. Bacterial cultures showed minimal growth, entirely inconsistent with the severity of her symptoms. Maximilian's visits became her lifeline. He would arrive during off hours, his medical bag concealing additional tests, his eyes carrying a mixture of professional concern and something deeper, a reconnection they had both long avoided. "Your cultures are showing something unusual," he whispered during one such visit, pulling up microscopic images on his tablet. "Not the standard pathogens we'd expect." Anna's epidemiological training kicked in. "Sand flies," she said suddenly, remembering Saya's warning. "In the village, that's what we need to investigate." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Her father, Hans, during one of his rare moments of clarity, spoke of a Brazilian student from decades ago, a case that sounded eerily similar to Anna's current condition. "The jungle medicine," Hans muttered, his fingers tracing imaginary lines on his hospital blanket. They knew. The doctors didn't listen. Linda Schreier, who had become more than just a caregiver, leaned in. "What do you mean, Hans?" "Paulo," he said clearly. "The student. His grandmother sent medicine from the forest. Saved his hand. Maximilian's research led him to Dr. Amanda Fisher, a tropical disease specialist who had spent years working in Southeast Asia. Her preliminary findings suggested a revolutionary approach, combining conventional treatments with compounds derived from local plant sources. "We're looking at more than just a standard infection, Doctor," Fisher explained during a video consultation. "The inflammatory response, the nerve involvement, it suggests a complex interaction between the parasite and the host's immune system." Anna's condition continued to deteriorate. The lesion on her arm expanded, and she began experiencing intermittent numbness that crept up towards her shoulder. The standard antibiotics not only failed, but seemed to accelerate the infection's progression. Sarah Mueller, a young nurse who had been monitoring Anna's case, became an unexpected ally. During a late-night shift, she slipped Anna a folder containing additional lab results, evidence that suggested a cover-up far more extensive than Anna had initially suspected. "Westpharma is funding the entire clinical trial," Sarah whispered, her hands shaking slightly. "Dr. Schmidt is pushing this new antibiotic, and your case could prove its effectiveness across a broader range of infections." The implications were chilling. Anna was no longer just a patient. She was a potential marketing tool for a pharmaceutical breakthrough. A letter arrived from Thailand, smuggled through the hospital's mail system. The childish handwriting was immediately recognizable. It was from Saya, the young girl from the village. "Dear Doctor," Anna, the letter read, "my grandmother says when the forest spirits mark you, only forest medicine can help. The leaf I send is from our healing plants. The doctors here do not understand." Enclosed was a dried leaf with distinctive serrated edges, a potential key to understanding the infection that was consuming her body. Maximilian studied the leaf carefully, his scientific mind wrestling with the possibilities. Traditional healing practices often contain genuine medical insights, he admitted reluctantly, especially regarding endemic diseases. Anna's world had narrowed to this battle against an unknown infection, against a medical system more interested in pharmaceutical profits than patient care, against the slow destruction of her body and career. But something was growing within her, not just the mysterious infection, but a determination that would challenge everything the medical establishment believed about healing, about traditional knowledge, about the complex relationship between human bodies and the environments they inhabit. The fight was just beginning. The days blurred together in a haze of medical uncertainty and institutional resistance. Anna's condition continued to deteriorate, the mysterious infection spreading with a ruthless precision that defied standard medical understanding. Dr. Paulo Ribeiro's email arrived like a lifeline. A Brazilian medical anthropologist who had dedicated his career to studying traditional healing practices. He brought a perspective that bridged the gap between Western medicine and indigenous knowledge. "Your symptoms," he wrote, "suggest a rare form of parasitic infection that goes beyond conventional diagnostic frameworks. The genetic markers you've described are consistent with cases I've studied in remote Amazonian communities." Maximilian arranged a video conference, his professional demeanor barely concealing his growing concern. Dr. Ribeiro appeared on the screen, his weathered face telling stories of decades spent in challenging medical environments. Western medicine often fails to recognize the complexity of local disease vectors, Ribeiro explained. What appears as a simple infection can be a complex interaction between parasite, host, and environmental factors. Anna's research instincts sparked to life. Despite the numbness creeping through her arm, her mind remained sharp, cataloging every detail of Ribeiro's explanation. The traditional leaf sent by Saya became a focal point of their discussion, a potential key to understanding the infection's unique characteristics. Dr. Fisher's laboratory began preliminary analysis of the plant sample. Early results suggested compounds that could modulate the inflammatory response in a way Western medications had failed to do. Meanwhile, the hospital's internal politics reached a boiling point. Dr. Schmidt's connection with West Pharma came under scrutiny. Anna's meticulous documentation of her treatment, smuggled out through Sarah's help, became potential evidence of medical misconduct. Her father, Hans, continued to provide unexpected insights. During one of his lucid moments, he spoke of a medical exchange student from decades ago, a story that seemed to echo Anna's current condition. "Paulo," Hans muttered, his fingers tracing invisible lines. The boy from Brazil. His grandmother sent forest medicine. The doctors didn't understand. Linda Schreier, more than just a caregiver now, began to piece together the fragments of Hans's memories. What seemed like the ramblings of an Alzheimer's patient might hold crucial medical insights. Maximilian worked tirelessly, risking his professional reputation. He reached out to colleagues in Thailand, in Brazil, anywhere that might provide additional context to Anna's mysterious condition. The infection was more than just a medical challenge. It was becoming a battle against institutional ignorance. The secure unit felt more like a prison with each passing day. Anna's arm continued to show progressive nerve involvement. The skin mottled with distinctive patterns that defied standard medical classification. She documented everything, every symptom, every treatment, every dismissal. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Saya's grandmother, through a complex network of connections facilitated by Dr. Ribeiro, sent additional information about the traditional treatments used in her village. It wasn't just a remedy. It was a holistic approach to understanding how the human body interacts with its environment. The spirits remember, Saya had said. Now those words took on a deeper meaning. Dr. Fisher's analysis of the plant sample revealed something extraordinary. Compounds found in the traditional remedy showed potential to interrupt the parasitic infection's progression in ways that Western medications had completely overlooked. The medical board hearing became inevitable. Anna prepared herself, knowing she was fighting not just for her own treatment, but for a fundamental shift in how medical knowledge is understood and applied. Maximilian stood by her side, their complicated history transforming into a partnership forged in the crucible of medical challenge. The line between personal and professional had blurred, replaced by a shared commitment to understanding. This is about more than just my infection, Anna told Maximilian during a quiet moment. This is about how we approach healing. The jungle had marked her. The spirits had chosen their messenger. And Anna Stalls was ready to listen. The medical board hearing arrived with the weight of institutional judgment. Anna sat composed, her damaged arm a visible testament to the failed treatments she had endured. Maximilian stood as her primary witness, his reputation as a respected infectious disease specialist adding gravity to her testimony. Dr. Schmidt's face was a mask of professional neutrality, but Anna could see the tension in his jaw. Westpharma's representatives sat quietly in the back of the room, their expensive suits a stark contrast to the clinical setting. Dr. Stalls began Dr. Heinrich Weber, the board's lead investigator. Your claims suggest a systematic failure in our medical approach. That's a serious accusation. Anna's response was measured. It's not an accusation. It's a documented progression of medical negligence. She presented her evidence methodically. Lab results showing the dismissed parasitic markers, the progression of her infection under inappropriate treatment, the communication trail that revealed attempts to suppress alternative diagnostic approaches. Dr. Paulo Ribeiro's video testimony became a turning point. His research, spanning decades of work in remote medical environments, provided a scientific framework for understanding the complex interaction between the parasite and the human immune system. Western medicine, Ribeiro explained, often fails to recognize the intricate ecological relationships that drive infectious diseases. What appears simple is often profoundly complex. The hearing dragged on for hours. Maximilian supported Anna not just professionally, but personally. Their complicated history had transformed into a partnership forged through medical challenge. Outside the hearing room, Linda continued her work with Hans. The elderly professor's moments of lucidity had become more frequent, almost as if the emotional intensity of Anna's situation had awakened something within his deteriorating mind. "The jungle remembers," Hans would repeat, his eyes suddenly clear. "Medicine is more than molecules. It's a conversation with the environment." Sarah Muller's testimony exposed the deeper layers of the pharmaceutical trial. Documents revealed how Westpharma had pressured the medical center to maintain a specific treatment protocol, prioritizing potential drug marketability over patient care. As the hearing concluded, Anna understood that her battle was about more than her personal medical journey. It was about challenging an entire system of medical understanding. Dr. Fisher's analysis of the traditional plant remedy provided additional breakthrough. The compounds found in the leaf sent by Saya showed remarkable potential for modulating inflammatory responses in parasitic infections. Weeks turned into months. Anna's arm, though permanently marked by the infection, began to show signs of healing. The traditional treatment protocols, combined with carefully monitored Western medical interventions, had created a new approach to understanding complex tropical infections. The Walker Garcia Foundation for Tropical Disease Research emerged from her experience, a bridge between traditional healing practices and modern medical research. Saya's village became a primary research site, with local healers working alongside international medical professionals. 3 months after the hearing, Anna stood at the window of her Hamburg apartment. Maximilian approached, carrying medical reports and research proposals. "The first international symposium on integrative tropical disease research is being planned," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. Anna flexed her damaged hand, feeling the lingering nerve damage, but also the strength of her recovery. The spirits of the jungle had indeed remembered her blood, but they had also given her a new purpose. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Medicine is a conversation with the environment, and she was finally ready to listen. In the small alpine village of Steinbach, where mist-laden mountains cradled centuries-old secrets, 12-year-old Amira Corvin discovered that her greatest difference would become her most powerful strength. Her synesthesia transformed the world around her into a symphony of sensations. That most people could never comprehend. Sounds became colors. Emotions carried distinct textures, and memories flickered like kaleidoscopic paintings. The morning light crept through her bedroom window, painting her walls with a melody of soft blues and gentle amber tones. Amira's fingers traced the window frame, feeling the subtle vibrations of distant church bells that translated into swirling emerald patterns across her vision. Her father, Maximilian Corvin, a detective with the local police, watched her from the doorway. "Ready for school, Main Schatz?" Max asked, his voice a deep burgundy that rippled through Amira's perceptual landscape. She nodded, adjusting her backpack, a gift from her late mother, adorned with intricate embroidery that seemed to hum with its own quiet music. The Steinbach School of Arts and Sciences was both her sanctuary and her battlefield. Here, her unique perception made her both fascinating and vulnerable. Ernst Müller, the school's security guard, moved through the hallways like a discordant gray noise. Something about him always set Amira's senses on edge. His movements carried a heavy silence, a muted darkness that seemed to absorb the light around him. Where other students saw a reliable, long-standing staff member, Amira perceived layers of unspoken tension. During music class, while her classmates played their instruments, Amira saw their sounds as intricate color patterns. A violin's melody became azure waves with crimson edges. A cello's deep tones transformed into rich purple rivers. But her own perception made her an outsider. Whispers followed her like persistent shadows. "Look at the weird girl, Marco," one of her classmates would mutter. Always staring into space, never playing normally. The music teacher, Frau Schneider, tried to understand. "Amira sees music differently," she would explain. "Her brain connects sounds to colors in a way we can't imagine." But understanding rarely translated to acceptance. That autumn morning changed everything. During the school's morning break, Amira noticed something unusual about Ernst Müller. His usual gray aura had transformed. Sharp burgundy edges flickered around him, like warning signals only she could perceive. A backpack tucked behind a maintenance cart caught her attention, its color signature completely out of place. Her detective father had taught her the importance of observation. "Details matter," Max would say. "The things most people overlook often hide the most important truths." When a local boy named Felix disappeared that week, Amira knew her unique perception might be the key to unraveling the mystery. The police searched, but the traditional methods yielded nothing. Müller moved through the investigation with a carefully constructed neutrality. But Amira's synesthetic perception caught the trembling gray-black tendrils of fear and guilt surrounding him. Piece by piece, she began documenting her observations, not in traditional notes, but in a special notebook where colors, sounds, and emotional textures merged into a complex map of truth. Each entry was a vivid painting of interconnected sensations that told a story beyond words. The local landscape, with its ancient forests and misty mountain passes, held secrets. The red clay near an abandoned hunting lodge, the specific frequency of Müller's footsteps, the dissonant color patterns that emerged when he spoke about the missing children, everything was a clue. Her father initially dismissed her insights. "These are just feelings, Amira," he would say, his voice a concerned deep blue. But Amira knew her perceptions were more than feelings. They were a language of their own, a way of seeing the world that cut through surface appearances. As the investigation intensified, Amira realized that her synesthesia was not a weakness to be hidden, but an extraordinary ability to perceive hidden truths. The very thing that had made her an outcast would become her greatest strength. The final confrontation would test everything she knew about her unique perception, about courage, and about the thin line between seeing and understanding. In the small alpine village of Steinbach, where mist-laden mountains cradled centuries-old secrets, 12-year-old Amira Corvin discovered that her greatest difference would become her most powerful strength. Her synesthesia transformed the world around her into a symphony of sensations that most people could never comprehend. Sounds became colors, emotions carried distinct textures, and memories flickered like kaleidoscopic paintings. The morning light crept through her bedroom window, painting her walls with a melody of soft blues and gentle amber tones. Amira's fingers traced the window frame, feeling the subtle vibrations of distant church bells that translated into swirling emerald patterns across her vision. Her father, Maximilian Corvin, a detective with the local police, watched her from the doorway. "Ready for school, Main Schatz?" Max asked, his voice a deep burgundy that rippled through Amira's perceptual landscape. She nodded, adjusting her backpack, a gift from her late mother, adorned with intricate embroidery that seemed to hum with its own quiet music. The Steinbach School of Arts and Sciences was both her sanctuary and her battlefield. Here, her unique perception made her both fascinating and vulnerable. Ernst Müller, the school's security guard, moved through the hallways like a discordant gray noise. Something about him always set Amira's senses on edge. His movements carried a heavy silence, a muted darkness that seemed to absorb the light around him. Where other students saw a reliable, long-standing staff member, Amira perceived layers of unspoken tension. During music class, while her classmates played their instruments, Amira saw their sounds as intricate color patterns. A violin's melody became azure waves with crimson edges. A cello's deep tones transformed into rich purple rivers. But her own perception made her an outsider. Whispers followed her like persistent shadows. "Look at the weird girl, Marco," one of her classmates would mutter. Always staring into space, never playing normally. The music teacher, Frau Schneider, tried to understand. "Amira sees music differently," she would explain. "Her brain connects sounds to colors in a way we can't imagine." But understanding rarely translated to acceptance. That autumn morning changed everything. During the school's morning break, Amira noticed something unusual about Ernst Müller. His usual gray aura had transformed, sharp burgundy edges flickered around him, like warning signals only she could perceive. A backpack tucked behind a maintenance cart caught her attention, its color signature completely out of place. Her detective father had taught her the importance of observation. "Details matter," Max would say. "The things most people overlook often hide the most important truths." When a local boy named Felix disappeared that week, Amira knew her unique perception might be the key to unraveling the mystery. The police searched, but the traditional methods yielded nothing. Müller moved through the investigation with a carefully constructed neutrality. But Amira's synesthetic perception caught the trembling gray-black tendrils of fear and guilt surrounding him. Piece by piece, she began documenting her observations, not in traditional notes, but in a special notebook where colors, sounds, and emotional textures merged into a complex map of truth. Each entry was a vivid painting of interconnected sensations that told a story beyond words. The old hunting lodge near the village became her focus. Its weathered wooden walls carried a cacophony of muted memories, sounds of past conversations trapped in its very structure. Amira discovered distinctive red clay near its foundation, a detail her father initially dismissed. "These are just impressions, Amira," Max would say, his voice a concerned deep blue. We need concrete evidence. But Amira knew her perceptions were more than mere impressions. They were a language of their own, a way of seeing the world that cut through surface appearances. As days passed, more children went missing. The village grew tense, whispers of fear replacing usual conversations. Muller's presence became more pronounced, his movements carrying an increasingly discordant energy that made Amira's skin crawl. One rainy evening, while her father worked late, Amira's synesthesia picked up an unusual frequency. The sound of Muller's truck, a harsh metallic gray with jagged crimson edges, moved through the village's quiet streets. Her intuition screamed with warning colors, violent reds and deep, ominous purples. She knew she couldn't wait. The adults wouldn't understand. Secretly, she began to track Muller's movements. Her notebook filled with intricate drawings, not just of places and events, but of the emotional landscapes that surrounded them. Each page was a complex artwork of perception, revealing patterns invisible to others. The hunting lodge became her primary focus. Its walls seemed to pulse with a dark, oppressive energy that only she could perceive. Sounds of past traumas were embedded in its very structure, whispers of fear, fragments of desperate conversations. Little did Amira know that her investigation was about to uncover a darkness that had been hidden for years. A secret that would challenge everything her father believed about their quiet mountain community. As the first winter snow began to fall, casting the village in a silent, white embrace, Amira prepared to confront a truth that would change everything. Her synesthesia was no longer just a unique perception. It had become a weapon, a tool of justice, a way to see what others could not. The final chapter of her investigation was about to begin. The mountain winter descended upon Steinbach with a fierce intensity that seemed to mirror the growing tension in the village. Amira's investigation had become a delicate dance of perception and caution. Her synesthesia now felt like both a gift and a burden, a sensory network that painted the world in ways no one else could comprehend. Her father, Maximilian, grew increasingly concerned. Late-night conversations between her parents, before her mother's passing, echoed in her memory. "She's different," her mother would say. "Different isn't broken. Different can be powerful." Those words became Amira's lifeline. The school had become a microcosm of tension. Marco and his friends continued their subtle bullying, but something had changed. Amira no longer cowered. Her confidence grew with each piece of evidence she collected, each subtle connection she discovered about Ernst Muller. Frau Schneider, the music teacher, became an unexpected ally. She recognized something special in Amira, not just her synesthetic abilities, but her profound capacity for observation. "Your perception is a gift," she would tell Amira during private moments. "Some see with their eyes. You see with your entire being." On a particularly cold December morning, Amira's perception captured something extraordinary. Muller's emotional landscape, usually a muted gray with sharp burgundy edges, had transformed. Fragments of sound became visual explosions of deep crimson and muted black. Something was about to break. Her notebook, now filled with intricate drawings and color-coded observations, became her most precious possession. Each page told a story the movement of shadows, the texture of sounds, the hidden narratives that most people missed. The old hunting lodge became her primary focus. Its wooden walls seemed to breathe with forgotten memories. Red clay surrounding its foundation told a story of movement, of secrets buried just beneath the surface. Amira knew the lodge held the key to the missing children. Her father remained skeptical, but something in her persistence began to crack his professional detachment. Max Corvin was a detective of exceptional skill, but even he couldn't ignore the mounting evidence his daughter was collecting. Sometimes, he told her one evening, watching her meticulously document her observations, the most important clues are the ones nobody else sees. Little did they know how prophetic those words would become. The breakthrough came on a night when the mountain winds howled with an almost supernatural intensity. Amira's synesthesia transformed the storm into a complex symphony of colors and textures, deep blues, violent purples, sharp crimson edges that cut through the darkness. Something was happening at the hunting lodge. Her plan was carefully constructed. She would not simply charge in like a typical child. Her approach was methodical, informed by her unique perception and her father's detective training. Every movement, every observation would be calculated. As snow fell outside, covering Steinbach in a blanket of pristine white, Amira prepared for the most important investigation of her young life. The missing children, the strange behavior of Ernst Müller, the secrets of the hunting lodge, everything was about to converge. Her synesthesia was no longer just a condition. It had become her greatest strength. The final confrontation was approaching, and Amira Corvin was ready. The mountain winter descended upon Steinbach with a fierce intensity that seemed to mirror the growing tension in the village. Amira's investigation had become a delicate dance of perception and caution. Her synesthesia now felt like both a gift and a burden, a sensory network that painted the world in ways no one else could comprehend. Her father, Maximilian, grew increasingly concerned. Late-night conversations between her parents, before her mother's passing, echoed in her memory. "She's different," her mother would say. "Different isn't broken. Different can be powerful." Those words became Amira's lifeline. The school had become a microcosm of tension. Marco and his friends continued their subtle bullying, but something had changed. Amira no longer cowered. Her confidence grew with each piece of evidence she collected, each subtle connection she discovered about Ernst Müller. Frau Schneider, the music teacher, became an unexpected ally. She recognized something special in Amira, not just her synesthetic abilities, but her profound capacity for observation. "Your perception is a gift," she would tell Amira during private moments. "Some see with their eyes. You see with your entire being." On a particularly cold December morning, Amira's perception captured something extraordinary. Müller's emotional landscape, usually a muted gray with sharp burgundy edges, had transformed. Fragments of sound became visual explosions of deep crimson and muted black. Something was about to break. Her notebook, now filled with intricate drawings and color-coded observations, became her most precious possession. Each page told a story, the movement of shadows, the texture of sounds, the hidden narratives that most people missed. The old hunting lodge became her primary focus. Its wooden walls seemed to breathe with forgotten memories. Red clay surrounding its foundation told a story of movement, of secrets buried just beneath the surface. Amira knew the lodge held the key to the missing children. Her father remained skeptical, but something in her persistence began to crack his professional detachment. Max Corvin was a detective of exceptional skill, but even he couldn't ignore the mounting evidence his daughter was collecting. Sometimes, he told her one evening, watching her meticulously document her observations, the most important clues are the ones nobody else sees. The final confrontation arrived on a night when the mountain winds carved through Steinbach like vengeful spirits. Amira's synesthesia transformed the storm into a complex symphony of colors and textures, deep blues, violent purples, sharp crimson edges that cut through the darkness. She had tracked Muller's movements for weeks. The hunting lodge stood isolated, a sentinel of secrets nestled against the mountain's stark landscape. Snow fell in heavy curtains, obscuring the world beyond, creating a perfect canvas of isolation. Amira's plan was precise. She had documented Muller's routine, mapped his movements, understood the rhythmic patterns of his emotional landscape. The backpack she'd seen weeks ago haunted her thoughts, its color signature screaming of hidden trauma and concealed pain. That night she would follow him. Her father was working a late shift, believing Amira was safely in her bedroom. But she had learned to move quietly, to blend her perceptions with the surrounding environment. Her synesthesia was more than a condition. It was a survival skill. The hunting lodge loomed before her, a structure that seemed to pulse with unspoken histories. Muller's truck was parked nearby, its metallic gray aura tinged with sharp burgundy edges of tension and fear. Inside the lodge, Amira's perceptions exploded into a kaleidoscope of sensory information. Sounds became visible colors. Emotions transformed into tangible textures. She could hear the whispers of past traumas embedded in the wooden walls, see the fractured memories that most would never comprehend. And then she saw them, the missing children. Locked in a hidden room, their emotional signatures were muted, compressed into tight balls of gray and pale blue. Fear, exhaustion, survival. Muller had not just been taking children. He had been collecting them, preserving them like some twisted museum curator of human suffering. Her synesthesia revealed something more, a deep, complex story of personal trauma. Muller wasn't a monster born of pure evil, but a broken human shaped by his own devastating past. As she moved through the lodge, collecting evidence, documenting everything in her notebook, Amira understood that true justice was more complicated than simple punishment. It required understanding, compassion, exposure. The storm outside intensified. Wind howled through the mountain passes, a natural accomplice to the drama unfolding inside the hunting lodge. Muller would return soon, and Amira was ready. Her perception was her weapon, her courage her shield, and her understanding would become the key to unlocking a truth that had remained hidden for far too long. The children's rescue was imminent. The truth was about to be revealed, and Amira Corvin was exactly where she needed to be. Her synesthesia had brought her here. Now it would see her through. The final moments approached with a symphony of sensations that only Amira could truly comprehend. Her synesthesia transformed the hunting lodge into a living canvas of emotions, memories, and hidden truths. The walls breathed with forgotten stories, each wooden beam vibrating with a complex melody of pain and survival. Ernst Muller's return was not a surprise to Amira. She had mapped his emotional landscape so precisely that his approach sang to her in a dissonant chorus of grays and deep burgundy fear, desperation, and a profound brokenness that went far beyond simple criminality. The missing children huddled in the hidden room, their emotional signatures a muted tapestry of terror and hope. Her preparation had been meticulous. Hidden among the lodge's shadows, Amira had positioned her evidence photographs, her carefully documented notebook, audio recordings captured through her unique perceptual abilities. Each piece told a story that words alone could never fully express. The door creaked open. Muller's heavy footsteps carried a weight of history, years of unresolved trauma, of pain that had twisted his perception of the world. Amira watched, her breath steady, her senses hyper-alert to every nuance of sound and emotion. "I know everything," she spoke softly, her voice a calm counterpoint to the storm raging outside. Muller froze. His emotional landscape exploded into a chaotic burst of colors: fear, rage, desperation, intertwining like violent brushstrokes. "You don't understand," he muttered, his voice a low rumble that Amira saw as a jagged gray line cutting through the room. The story of Ernst Muller was not a simple tale of evil. Her synesthesia revealed layers of trauma, a childhood of abuse, years of isolation, a mind fractured by experiences most could never comprehend. He had become a collector of lost children, not out of pure malevolence, but from a deeply broken understanding of protection and connection. "The children," Amira continued, "they're not yours to keep." Her father's detective training merged with her unique perception. She had documented everything: Muller's movements, the children's locations, the intricate web of his past crimes. Each piece of evidence was a color, a sound, a texture that told a complete story. The confrontation was inevitable, but Amira was not afraid. Outside, the mountain storm reached its crescendo. Wind howled through the ancient pines, a natural accompaniment to the drama unfolding inside the hunting lodge. Snow fell in thick curtains, isolating the lodge from the rest of Steinbach, creating a world unto itself. Maximilian Corvin was already moving. Amira had ensured that her carefully placed evidence, her strategic positioning of her discoveries, would lead her father directly to them. The police would arrive soon. Muller understood this too. His movements became desperate, his emotional landscape a chaotic explosion of survival instinct. But Amira had anticipated every possibility. The children were safe. The evidence was secure. As sirens began to pierce the storm's fury, Amira realized that her synesthesia was more than a condition. It was a gift, a way of seeing the world that cut through deception, that revealed truths hidden from ordinary perception. The rescue would be just the beginning. In the days that followed, Steinbach would transform. The quiet alpine village would confront the darkness that had lurked beneath its pristine surface. And at the center of it, all would be a 12-year-old girl whose unique perception had brought justice where traditional methods had failed. Amira Corvin had done more than solve a crime. She had given voice to the voiceless, brought light to hidden shadows, and proven that being different was not a weakness. It was a profound strength. The mountain stood as a silent witness. The storm began to recede, and a new understanding was about to dawn over Steinbach. Justice, Amira understood, was not about punishment. It was about understanding, about seeing the full complexity of human experience. Her synesthesia had been her guide, her courage her weapon, her compassion her true power. The weeks following the rescue transformed Steinbach in ways no one could have anticipated. Amira Corvin became more than just a child who solved a crime. She became a symbol of understanding, of seeing beyond the surface. The school that had once been a battlefield of whispers and isolation now became a sanctuary of acceptance. Principal Weber, deeply moved by Amira's story, implemented a comprehensive program focused on recognizing and celebrating individual differences. Children with learning disabilities, unique perceptual abilities, and those who felt marginalized found themselves at the center of a new educational approach. Marco, the boy who had once been Amira's primary tormentor, approached her during a school assembly. His previous confidence had been replaced by a genuine humility. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice a soft amber that Amira perceived as a genuine attempt at redemption. "I didn't understand." Frau Schneider expanded the school's music program, creating special workshops that explored different ways of experiencing sound and perception. Amira became an unexpected mentor, helping other children understand that being different was not a weakness, but a profound gift. The psychological evaluation of Ernst Müller revealed a complex narrative of childhood trauma, systemic failures, and a deeply fractured understanding of protection. While he would face justice, the community began to understand that healing was more important than simple punishment. Maximilian Corvin's approach to detective work changed fundamentally. He began to incorporate Amira's unique insights into his investigations, recognizing that traditional methods often missed crucial details. Their relationship deepened, becoming a partnership of mutual respect and understanding. At home, quiet moments became their most precious. Maximilian would sit with Amira, listening to her describe how she experienced the world. "Tell me about the colors," he would say, and she would paint verbal landscapes of perception that challenged everything he thought he knew about human experience. The rescued children underwent extensive therapy. Their stories of survival became a testament to human resilience. Each of them, in their own way, found strength in their shared experience of survival. 1 year after the events at the hunting lodge, Steinbach held a community event that would have been unimaginable before. A symposium on neurodiversity, perception, and understanding brought together experts, students, and community members. Amira, now 13, stood on the stage not as a victim, not as a hero, but as a bridge between different ways of experiencing the world. "Perception is not about seeing," she told the audience, her voice calm and clear. "It's about understanding. It's about recognizing that every person carries a unique way of experiencing reality." Her synesthesia, once a source of isolation, had become her greatest strength. The colors, sounds, and emotional textures that had once marked her as different now allowed her to connect with the world in ways most could never imagine. As winter descended once again on the Alpine village, Amira looked out over Steinbach. The mountains stood as silent witnesses to transformation, to the power of understanding, of seeing beyond the surface. She thought about her mother's words, "Different isn't broken. Different can be powerful." Now she understood them completely. The story of Amira Corvin was far from over. It was, in many ways, just beginning. Marcus Rivera stood proudly on the deck of his childhood friend Jake's waterfront cabin, displaying his fresh tattoo to the gathered crowd, celebrating his engagement to Sarah. The intricate memorial piece on his left shoulder, Blade honored his fallen squad leader, Ryan Torres, whose name was etched in bold Gothic letters, surrounded by military insignia. The late summer sun of Port Meridian, Oregon, cast golden rays across the Pacific coastline, making the fresh ink seem to shimmer against his tanned skin. Without warning, a searing pain shot through his back like molten metal, being poured directly onto his spine. Marcus collapsed onto the wooden deck as Sarah's terrified scream cut through the celebration, sending their engagement party into chaos. 3 weeks later, Marcus awakened in the sterile environment of Meridian General Hospital, his left shoulder and back immobilized under layers of medical dressing. The persistent itching beneath his skin had transformed into an unbearable burning sensation that even the strongest painkillers barely touched. When Dr. Elena Rodriguez slowly peeled back the bandages during her morning rounds, revealing what was actually moving beneath his inflamed skin, the horror that flashed across the medical team's faces made Marcus's blood run cold. The sight before them defied medical explanation. Parasitic larvae tunneling beneath the surface like living highways of infection. Port Meridian sat nestled between the rugged Oregon coast and dense evergreen forests, a picturesque town where fishing boats shared the harbor with pleasure craft, and weathered buildings housed generations of families who knew each other's stories like their own. Tourists came for the artisan breweries and fresh seafood, but missed the tight bonds forged through winter storms and summer festivals that made this place more than just another scenic coastal village. Marcus Rivera had grown up here, left as a proud Army Ranger, and returned 10 months ago a fundamentally changed man. At 27, his athletic frame still carried military posture, but his dark eyes held shadows that hadn't existed before his deployment to Iraq. His nightmares often woke him screaming, reliving the roadside bombing in Fallujah where his squad leader, Ryan Torres, had shielded him from the blast, taking shrapnel meant for Marcus. Sarah Mitchell had been Marcus's high school sweetheart before he enlisted. She had waited faithfully through 2 deployments, writing letters that carried the scent of vanilla perfume she always wore. Now 6 months pregnant with their first child, she taught 4th grade at the local elementary school and had become Marcus's anchor in the turbulent aftermath of his war experience. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had served Port Meridian for nearly 22 years after leaving a promising career at Oregon Health and Science University. She had chosen this coastal town after losing her younger brother in Desert Storm, dedicating herself to treating fishing injuries, childhood ailments, and increasingly, the broken veterans who returned to their hometown carrying invisible wounds. She recognized Marcus's 1,000-yard stare all too well, having seen it in too many young faces over the years. Jake Sullivan had been Marcus's closest friend, since they had built tree forts in the coastal forests behind their high school. While Marcus had chosen military service, Jake had channeled his artistic talents into a successful tattoo parlor downtown. Sullivan's ink had become a local institution, though Jake still preferred deep-sea fishing with Marcus on weekends over the constant stream of tourist customers. Roberto Rivera captained the Maria Elena, a weathered fishing vessel that had supported 3 generations of the Rivera family. He had opposed Marcus's enlistment, creating a rift that still hadn't fully healed. The old man's calloused hands and son, weathered face told the story of a life spent battling the Pacific. But he couldn't understand the war that continued raging inside his son's mind long after he had returned home. Marcus stood outside the modest building that housed Coastal Custom Tattoos, his heart racing with anticipation and nervousness. The memorial tattoo had been his idea, a way to honor Ryan's sacrifice and perhaps quiet some of the survivor's guilt that haunted his sleepless nights. The shop wasn't as polished as Jake's downtown establishment, but Lucas Torres had reached out after hearing about Marcus's plans, offering to create his brother's memorial himself. It should be family, Lucas had said during their phone conversation, his voice carrying the same measured cadence as Ryan's. Ryan would want that, you know. The small studio sat at the end of a gravel road, just steps from where Pacific waves crashed against barnacle-covered rocks. Wind chimes made from driftwood and sea glass clinked softly in the ocean breeze as Marcus pushed open the weathered door. The space smelled of antiseptic, tattoo ink, and something earthy he couldn't quite identify, almost like rich soil after rain. Lucas looked up from his workstation. At 36, he was 4 years older than Ryan would have been, sharing the same strong jawline and intense brown eyes. But where Ryan's gaze had always held warmth and easy humor, Lucas's seemed to burn with something Marcus couldn't define, an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. "You came," Lucas said, standing to shake Marcus's hand. His grip lingered a moment longer than necessary, calloused fingers pressing firmly against Marcus's palm. "I've been working on some designs for you." He spread several sketches across the counter, variations of Ryan's name integrated with Army Ranger symbols, angel wings, and coordinates of the Iraqi province where they had served together. Marcus's throat tightened as his finger traced over the final design. Simple block letters of Ryan's name with dog tags hanging from the letter R. The dates of his birth and death worked into the chain links. "This one," Marcus said quietly, his voice catching slightly. Ryan wasn't much for flash or show. He would want something clean and respectful. Lucas nodded, something flickering behind his intense eyes. "I thought you might choose that design. It captures his essence, doesn't it? Straightforward, honest." As Lucas began preparing his workstation, arranging inks and needles with practiced precision, he mentioned the price would be half his normal rate. Ryan would have wanted that too, he said, though something in his tone seemed forced. As Marcus settled into the tattoo chair, removing his shirt to expose his left shoulder blade, Lucas paused, his hand hovering over a small wooden box on his shelf. After a moment's hesitation, he opened it and removed a vial containing dark, almost black powder. "What's that?" Marcus asked, watching as Lucas examined the vial's contents. "Special additive for the black ink," Lucas replied, his voice casual but his movements deliberate. "Makes the color more vibrant, more meaningful. It's something I save for special memorial pieces. Helps the tattoo connect more deeply with the skin." Marcus nodded, thinking nothing unusual about the explanation. Many tattoo artists had their own proprietary techniques and ingredients. As Lucas mixed the powder into the ink cap, the tattoo machine buzzed to life, and Marcus closed his eyes as the needle first pierced his skin. Each puncture felt like a small act of penance, a physical manifestation of the emotional weight he carried. Throughout the 4-hour session, conversation between them remained sparse and strained. Occasionally, Lucas would ask probing questions about the bombing, about Ryan's final moments. Questions Marcus had answered countless times in debriefings and at the funeral. Each time, Marcus noticed Lucas's jaw tighten at his responses, a muscle jumping beneath the stubbled skin. He didn't suffer. Marcus repeated the merciful lie he had told Ryan's family, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. It was instantaneous when the IED went off. When Lucas finally wiped down the finished tattoo, Marcus stared at Ryan's name, now permanently etched into his skin. The dark lines seemed to pulse with his heartbeat, the lettering crisp and bold against his olive-toned skin. Something about the ink seemed different, almost alive in the way it caught and reflected light. "It's perfect," Marcus said, unexpectedly emotional as he examined the work in the mirror. "Thank you for doing this." Lucas's expression softened slightly as he covered the tattoo with a specialized bandage. "Keep it covered for 3 hours, then wash it gently with antibacterial soap. It might itch more than usual. I use traditional techniques and natural additives, which means it'll heal deeper into the skin layers." That night, as Marcus showed Sarah the freshly cleaned tattoo, he felt oddly proud despite the throbbing pain. The black ink seemed to catch the lamplight differently as he turned his shoulder, almost giving the impression that the letters shifted subtly in the changing illumination. "It's beautiful," Sarah said, though her fingers hovered above his skin without making contact. "Is it supposed to look so vivid? The ink seems almost 3-dimensional. "That's quality work," Marcus smiled, admiring the tattoo in their bedroom mirror. "Not like those mass-produced flash pieces tourists get at the boardwalk shops." Over the following days, Marcus found himself constantly checking the tattoo in mirrors and reflective surfaces. The itching had started normally enough for a healing tattoo, he told himself, though it seemed to intensify dramatically at night, sometimes waking him from already troubled sleep with an almost burning sensation. By the 5th day, he noticed something that made his stomach clench with unease. The lines of the tattoo appeared to have shifted slightly, the dog tags now hanging at a different angle than he remembered. The dates seemed to have moved closer together, creating a more compressed appearance. "You're imagining things," he told his reflection in the bathroom mirror, though he couldn't shake the growing uneasiness as he traced the increasingly inflamed skin around the letters. At the engagement party Jake had insisted on throwing, Marcus ignored the burning sensation that had replaced the itching entirely. He wore a tank top despite the cool Pacific evening, proudly displaying Ryan's name as friends and family gathered on Jake's deck overlooking Meridian Bay. To Marcus and Sarah, Jake raised his beer bottle in a toast, and to the little one on the way, as glasses clinked together in celebration, a pain unlike anything Marcus had experienced since the battlefield ripped through his shoulder and back. The beer bottle slipped from his fingers, shattering on the deck as his knees buckled. Sarah's scream seemed to come from miles away as darkness closed in around him. His last conscious sensation being the distinct feeling of something writhing and moving beneath his skin. The fluorescent lights of Port Meridian General's emergency room cast harsh shadows across Dr. Rodriguez's concerned face as she examined Marcus's shoulder and back. 4 days had passed since his collapse at the engagement party. Days filled with escalating pain and fevered dreams that blended Iraq with coastal Oregon in disturbing combinations. The tattoo site had transformed into an angry, swollen landscape of red valleys and raised ridges, with the black lines of Ryan's name distorted into barely recognizable patterns. The skin felt hot to the touch and appeared to ripple with movement just beneath the surface. "I've never encountered anything quite like this, Doctor," Rodriguez murmured, gently probing the inflamed area with gloved fingers. She flinched slightly when her examination detected distinct movement beneath the skin. "We need comprehensive imaging immediately." Marcus lay still as nurses wheeled him through the hospital corridors, his mind foggy from pain medication and fever. The small regional hospital rarely dealt with cases more complicated than fishing accidents and tourist mishaps. He caught whispered conversations between staff, mentions of infectious disease specialists, and possible emergency transfers to Portland. Hours later, Dr. Rodriguez returned to his room, her expression grave as she placed several scan images on the illuminated viewing board. "Marcus, I'm afraid we've discovered something highly unusual," she began, pointing to thin, thread-like shadows visible in the scans, winding beneath his skin in serpentine paths. "The imaging reveals what appear to be parasitic organisms," she continued, her voice steady but concerned. "Specifically, larvae of what looks like a hookworm species, but with characteristics I don't recognize from standard medical literature." "Hookworms." Sarah's voice cracked from where she sat beside his bed, her hands protectively cradling her swollen belly. "Like actual worms living under his skin. I believe they entered through the tattoo site, Doctor," Rodriguez explained carefully. "The equipment or ink used may have been contaminated with these organisms. Hookworms typically enter through skin contact and then migrate through body tissues, but this strain appears unusually aggressive." Marcus stared at the ceiling tiles, Ryan's voice suddenly echoing in his memory. "Watch your 6, Rivera. Not everyone out here has your back." At the time, he had thought Ryan meant the Iraqi civilians whose loyalties were uncertain. Now a much darker possibility emerged. "Lucas," Marcus whispered the name like a curse. "He did this deliberately, Doctor." Rodriguez frowned. "Lucas Torres, Ryan's brother. That's a very serious accusation, Marcus. He's been tattooing locals and visitors for over 6 years without any incidents." "He had something special," Marcus insisted, his voice strengthening with certainty. "A powder he mixed with the ink. Said it was for memorial pieces, made them more meaningful." The way he kept asking about Ryan's death, about the details of how it happened. "He blamed me for it. He always has." Sarah squeezed his good hand firmly. "Maybe it was an accident." Maybe he didn't properly sterilize his equipment, or the powder was contaminated somehow. But Marcus couldn't shake the memory of Lucas's burning gaze, the lingering handshake, the deliberate way he had added that powder to the ink. No, he said with growing conviction. He knew exactly what he was doing. Later that afternoon, 2 police officers visited Marcus's hospital room. Detective Michelle Barnes and Officer David Kim took notes with professional detachment. But their expressions betrayed skepticism when Marcus described his suspicions about Lucas Torres. Lucas Torres has been operating his tattoo business for 6 years without a single health code violation, Detective Barnes said. He's a respected artist who lost his brother in military service. That's a pretty serious accusation to make without concrete evidence. What about the powder he mixed into the ink? Marcus demanded. Could be analyzed, tested for contamination. Could be anything, Officer Kim replied. Many tattoo artists use proprietary mixtures of inks and additives. We'll certainly look into it, but you don't have physical evidence of deliberate contamination. So you don't believe me, Marcus finished bitterly. After the officers left, Marcus struggled to sit up despite the pain radiating through his back and shoulder. I need to talk to Jake. He'll know what Lucas typically uses in his shop, whether this powder was something new. Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Rodriguez returned with Dr. Patricia Hendricks, a parasitologist who had been consulting via video conference from Oregon Health and Science University. We need to begin aggressive treatment immediately, Dr. Rodriguez announced, her voice tense with urgency. These parasitic organisms are multiplying at an alarming rate and spreading through your tissue. Will he lose mobility in his arm? Sarah asked directly, always the one to voice the questions Marcus couldn't bring himself to ask. We're doing everything possible to prevent that, Doctor. Hendricks answered carefully through the video link. But I won't mislead you about the severity. This is unlike any hookworm infestation I've documented. The organisms seem specially adapted to human tissue and resistant to standard anti-parasitic medications. That evening, Jake visited the hospital, bringing disturbing news that sent a chill through Marcus despite his fever. Lucas closed his shop yesterday morning, Jake reported. Left a note saying he was taking time off for personal reasons. When I went by his apartment, the landlord said he packed up and left without giving notice. He knows, Marcus muttered through gritted teeth. He knows they discovered what he did, so he's running. Jake looked uncomfortable, running a hand through his sandy hair. Look, man, I know you're in pain and looking for answers. But Lucas, he's been struggling since Ryan died. Drinking too much, isolating himself, but deliberately infecting you with parasites. That seems beyond even his grief. You don't understand the guilt I've carried, Marcus insisted. The questions he kept asking about the bombing, about why I survived when Ryan didn't. He thinks I should have died instead of his brother. Jake sighed heavily. He was drunk at Murphy's Tavern last month, talking crazy about how the wrong soldier came home from Iraq. But lots of people say things they don't mean when they're grieving and drinking. Sarah, who had been listening silently while monitoring her pregnancy symptoms, suddenly gasped and rolled up her sleeve. Marcus, look at this. A small red patch marked her forearm, with a thin, raised line barely visible beneath the surface. I've been scratching here since yesterday. It's exactly where I touched your tattoo when it was still fresh, before you covered it. The room seemed to tilt as Marcus processed the horrifying implication. Whatever Lucas had done wasn't contained to punishing just him. The contamination had somehow transferred to Sarah, potentially endangering both her and their unborn child. Dr. Rodriguez ordered immediate testing for Sarah, her professional composure barely concealing her alarm at this development. Within hours, the diagnosis was confirmed. The same parasitic infection had somehow transferred from Marcus's tattoo to Sarah's skin through direct contact with the contaminated ink. Lying in adjacent hospital beds that night, Marcus reached across the gap between them to hold Sarah's hand. "I'll find him," he whispered, the words foreign on his tongue despite his military training. "I'll make him pay for what he's done to you and our baby." "Don't talk like that," Sarah pleaded, her voice weak but firm. "We need to focus on getting healthy for our child. Revenge won't cure us." A soft knock interrupted them as Jake returned, his face ashen with shock. "I went through some of Lucas's things at the shop. The police gave me access since I co-signed his lease." He hesitated, then placed a leather-bound journal on Marcus's bed. "You need to read this." The journal contained detailed research notes about parasitic infections common in Iraq, particularly those found in rural areas where Marcus's unit had been stationed. Pages of research on life cycles, transmission methods, and symptoms were interspersed with increasingly disturbed rantings about justice, replacement, and evening the scales. "I knew it," Marcus said, his voice hollow with vindication and horror. "He planned every detail of this." Jake nodded grimly. "There's more. I found a box with soil samples labeled Fallujah Ground Zero. I think it's actually from over there, from where Ryan died." A terrible clarity washed over Marcus. The powder in the ink hadn't been some artistic additive. Lucas had literally brought the Iraqi soil where Ryan had died back to Oregon, cultivated parasites from it, and introduced them directly into Marcus's bloodstream through the tattoo. "I've already given everything to the police," Jake said. "They've issued a warrant for Lucas's arrest, but no one's seen him since he disappeared yesterday." As Marcus processed this confirmation of his worst suspicions, Dr. Rodriguez entered with Dr. Hendricks, who had driven down from Portland. Their grave expressions conveyed the severity of the situation before they spoke. "The infection is progressing faster than we initially feared," Dr. Rodriguez said. "The larvae appear to be a hybrid strain, possibly engineered to be resistant to standard treatments." Dr. Hendricks stepped forward. "Mr. Rivera, we need to discuss more aggressive intervention options, including possible surgical removal of infected tissue to prevent systemic spread." "Surgical removal," Marcus repeated slowly. "You mean amputation?" "We mean comprehensive evaluation of all treatment options," Dr. Hendricks corrected, though her eyes told a different story. "The parasites are approaching major blood vessels and nerve clusters. If they breach those barriers, we risk life-threatening systemic infection." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus thought of the child he would soon need to hold, of Sarah, who might need his support during delivery, of the fishing trips with his father that had finally started healing their relationship, all potentially destroyed. because of one man's twisted interpretation of justice. "Find Lucas," Marcus told Jake, his voice now calm with deadly resolve. "He created this nightmare. He'll know how to stop it." The extraction procedure was excruciating despite local anesthesia. Marcus lay face down on the surgical table, his left shoulder and back extended and immobilized. As doctor, Patricia Hendricks used specialized instruments to remove visible parasite tracks just beneath his skin. Each incision felt like fire, each extraction like barbed wire being slowly dragged through his flesh. The surgical nurse kept wiping perspiration from his forehead as he bit down on the protective mouth guard they had given him to prevent him from biting his tongue or damaging his teeth. "We're removing as many as we can access, Doctor," Hendricks assured him, her voice steady despite the gruesome nature of the task. "But I'm concerned about deeper migration patterns. The imaging shows some have traveled beyond what we can reach with surface extraction." Marcus nodded, unable to speak through the mouth guard. In his mind, he was transported back to Iraq, enduring a different kind of agony. The memory swept over him unbidden. The dusty landscape of Fallujah province, the routine patrol that had turned deadly, the moment when Ryan had thrown himself over Marcus and absorbed the full force of the roadside bomb. "Rivera, get down," Ryan had shouted, his voice the last thing Marcus heard clearly before the explosion, and the warm spray of his squad leader's blood across his face and uniform. The present and past blurred together as doctor. Hendricks extracted another writhing parasite. Marcus's muffled groan brought him back to the sterile hospital room, away from the dust and chaos of war. "Last one we can reach today, Doctor," Hendricks announced, dropping something thin and moving into a specimen container. "We'll need to monitor the deeper organisms and see if medication can draw them toward the surface where we can extract them." When they wheeled him back to his room, Sarah wasn't there. The absence sent a spike of panic through him, until a nurse explained they had taken her for additional ultrasound monitoring. Her infection had caused her fever to spike, raising concerns about premature labor. Roberto Rivera sat awkwardly in the visitor's chair, his weathered captain's hat clutched in his hands, a nervous habit Marcus recognized from childhood disasters. His father had held that same hat the day Marcus announced his enlistment. "They're saying you might lose the use of your arm," Roberto said without preamble, his gruff voice unable to fully conceal his deep concern. Marcus shifted painfully against the pillows. "They're trying everything first. Aggressive anti-parasitic drugs, surgical extraction procedures." Roberto nodded, his eyes fixed on the heavily bandaged shoulder. "Your grandfather lost 2 fingers to a winch accident on the Maria Elena. Still captained her for 15 years after that. Adapted his grip, learned new ways to tie knots. It was as close to reassurance as his father could manage, and Marcus recognized the offering. "I know, Dad. The whole town's talking," Roberto continued. "About Lucas Torres. Police found evidence at his shop and apartment. Soil samples from overseas, research papers on parasites." He paused, struggling with the implications. "Why would he do this to you, Joe?" Marcus closed his eyes, the question he had been wrestling with since the diagnosis. "Because I lived and Ryan didn't. Because I came home and he came home in a box." Before Roberto could respond, "Doctor." Rodriguez entered with an uncharacteristically serious expression. Marcus, we've received the full laboratory analysis of the parasitic specimens. They're definitely hookworms, but a rare variant primarily found in a specific region of Iraq. Anbar province, Marcus said quietly, where we were stationed. Yes, she confirmed, surprise flickering across her face. How did you know? Because that's where Ryan died, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the emotional weight. Lucas somehow obtained soil from that exact location. He must have cultivated these parasites specifically from Iraqi dirt. Roberto stood abruptly. I'll join the search teams. The police are organizing volunteers to comb the coastline and forest areas. After his father left, Marcus lay back, his mind racing despite the powerful painkillers. Something about this felt deeply personal, in a way that went beyond Lucas's grief. The deliberate nature of the infection, the specific geographical source. It spoke of a vendetta born from more than just losing a brother. A soft knock preceded Jake's entrance. He carried a bundle of letters tied with faded olive green military ribbon. Found these in Lucas's apartment, Jake said, placing them carefully on the bed. They're from Ryan to you. Letters that were returned to sender after Ryan was killed. Lucas must have kept them all these years. Marcus stared at the bundle, his heart racing. I never received any of these. The mail service said there were no personal effects or correspondence for me. Jake hesitated. I read one of them, Marcus. Ryan knew something was wrong with that patrol. He was scared, and he was trying to warn you. With his functional hand, Marcus untied the ribbon and opened the top letter, dated just 2 days before the bombing that claimed Ryan's life. Rivera, something's not right about this intelligence report. The locals in our sector are acting nervous, avoiding eye contact. Remember that village elder who warned us about the market road? Same gut feeling. Lieutenant Rodriguez says we proceed with the patrol anyway. But I don't trust whoever's making these tactical decisions from behind a desk. If this goes sideways, don't do anything heroic or stupid. You've got Sarah waiting back home, and I've got nobody but Lucas, and he's always been fine handling things on his own. Watch your back out there. Tours, Marcus let the letter fall to his lap, the words blurring through unexpected tears. He knew it was a trap. I tried to tell the lieutenant the same thing, but we had our orders. Jake nodded grimly. There are more letters like that. Details about command decisions, about who was responsible for sending your squad into that area despite local warnings. Lucas has been reading these for years, building up his anger and resentment. But why blame me specifically? Marcus asked, genuine confusion in his voice. The orders came from above both of us. Because it's easier than blaming a faceless military bureaucracy, said a new voice from the doorway. Dr. Rodriguez stood with a man Marcus hadn't seen in years. Staff Sergeant Kyle Morrison, who had been their platoon leader in Iraq. Now dressed in civilian clothes, he still carried himself with unmistakable military bearing. Morrison, Marcus attempted to sit up straighter. What are you doing here? Veterans Affairs contacted me about your condition, Morrison replied, stepping into the room. When they mentioned parasitic infection from Iraqi soil, I connected the dots pretty quickly. His face darkened with memory. Lucas Torres contacted me about 8 months ago. asking detailed questions about the bombing, about who made the decision to send your squad into that sector. The pieces began falling into place in Marcus's mind, creating a picture he didn't want to see. You told him it was my recommendation, didn't you? That I volunteered our squad for that patrol. Morrison had the decency to look ashamed. I told him what the official after-action report stated, that you had provided local intelligence supporting the mission route. I didn't tell him you were following direct orders against your better judgment, or that you accepted responsibility afterward to protect Ryan's posthumous reputation. Jake looked between them, confusion evident on his face. What are you talking about? What really happened over there? Marcus had never shared the complete truth with anyone in Port Meridian, not even Sarah. The weight of it had been his alone to carry for over 2 years. Now, with parasites from the very soil where that truth was born, literally consuming him from within, the burden seemed almost poetic in its terrible symmetry. Ryan argued against that patrol route, Marcus explained, his voice hollow with old pain. Said his local informant was acting strange, that the whole area felt like a setup. I agreed with his assessment completely. But Lieutenant Rodriguez overruled both of us, said we had our orders from battalion. He swallowed hard, the memory still raw after all this time. When the IED exploded and everything went to hell, Ryan disobeyed a direct order to maintain his position. He broke cover to shield me from the secondary blast and took shrapnel that should have killed me. In the after-action review, Morrison finished quietly, they wanted to know why Ryan broke formation, why he abandoned his post. Marcus continued, his voice barely above a whisper. The truth would have meant his family received reduced benefits, no military honors, no flag on his coffin. So I told the investigators that I had received reliable intelligence from a local source supporting that patrol route, that Ryan was following my lead as senior squad member when he moved to assist me. His eyes met Morrison's across the room. The brass was satisfied to have someone to blame and a dead hero to honor. Ryan got his Purple Heart and Bronze Star. His family got full benefits and a folded flag. The room fell silent as the implications settled over them like a heavy blanket. Lucas had spent years believing Marcus had led his brother into an ambush based on faulty intelligence, then returned home to play the survivor, while Ryan came back in a metal coffin. Jesus, Marcus, Jake finally said, his voice thick with emotion. You've been carrying this guilt all this time. A commotion in the hallway interrupted them. Dr. Rodriguez stepped outside briefly, then returned with undisguised alarm on her face. Marcus, it's Sarah. She's experiencing severe abdominal cramping and early contractions. We're concerned about premature labor triggered by the infection. Fear gripped Marcus more powerfully than any physical pain he had endured. Take me to her, he demanded, already attempting to swing his legs over the edge of the bed. You're in no condition to be moved, Doctor. Rodriguez began. I said take me to her, Marcus repeated, his voice leaving absolutely no room for argument. They compromised with a wheelchair. Morrison and Jake helped transfer him carefully, mindful of his freshly bandaged extraction sites. As they navigated the hospital corridors toward the maternity ward, Morrison kept pace alongside the wheelchair. We'll find Lucas, Morrison promised. I've got guys from the old unit driving in from all over the Northwest. Rangers take care of their own, always. Sarah lay curled on her side in the maternity ward, monitors beeping steadily around her, her face flushed with fever. When she saw Marcus, her attempt at a reassuring smile broke his heart into pieces. "The baby's okay for now," she said immediately, knowing his first concern. "Just some Braxton Hicks contractions triggered by my fever. They've given me medication to prevent actual premature labor." Marcus reached for her hand with his functional arm, noticing how hot her skin felt to the touch. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. This is all because of me, because of choices I made years ago." She shook her head firmly, despite her obvious discomfort. "Don't you dare blame yourself for this. This is Lucas's doing, his choice to hurt innocent people because of his pain." "Doctor." Hendricks entered with another specialist, their expressions carefully neutral in that way medical professionals adopt when delivering complex news. "Mrs. Rivera, Mr. Rivera, Doctor." Hendricks began formally. "We've completed our analysis of both your infections. While they are indeed the same parasitic organism, yours, Mrs. Rivera, appears to be responding more favorably to our treatment protocols." She turned to Marcus. "Your case is significantly more advanced and proving resistant to standard medications. We believe this is because the parasites were introduced directly into your bloodstream through the tattoo process, whereas Mrs. Rivera's infection was secondary contact transmission." The other specialist stepped forward. "We need to discuss immediate next steps for you, Mr. Rivera. Our latest imaging shows migration toward deeper muscle tissue and potentially toward major blood vessels and nerve clusters." Marcus understood what they weren't saying directly. "You still think amputation might be necessary?" "It remains our last resort option," the doctor assured them. "But yes, we need to prepare for that possibility. The parasites are causing significant tissue death along their migration routes, and there's serious risk of life-threatening systemic infection if we can't halt their progression." Sarah's grip on his hand tightened painfully. "There has to be another treatment option. Something experimental, anything, Doctor." Hendricks hesitated. "There are experimental protocols, but they require very specific antibodies developed from the exact source of infection." "Thomas," Marcus concluded, "you need Lucas and his soil samples to create a targeted treatment. Finding him has become a critical medical priority, Doctor." Hendricks confirmed. "Without those materials, we're working blind against an engineered parasite strain." Outside Meridian General Hospital, the search for Lucas Torres had intensified throughout the day. Port Meridian might look idyllic to tourists, but it encompassed miles of isolated coastline, dense coastal forests, and countless fishing cabins and boathouses, where someone familiar with the terrain could disappear indefinitely. Lucas, like his brother Ryan, had grown up exploring every hidden corner of the peninsula. By evening, Marcus had been moved to share Sarah's room in the maternity ward, allowing medical staff to monitor both patients simultaneously. Their beds had been positioned close enough that they could hold hands in the space between them. The latest round of anti-parasitic medications had left Marcus nauseous and dizzy, while Sarah fought to stay awake despite her exhaustion. "Tell me about the letters," Sarah murmured, fighting sleep. What else did Ryan write to you? Marcus had been avoiding this conversation, but in the dim light of the hospital room, with pain medication lowering his emotional defenses, the truth came more easily. He knew something was wrong with that mission, Marcus said softly. We both felt it in our guts, but military orders are military orders. I told everyone afterward that it was my intelligence that led us into that ambush, that Ryan was just following my tactical assessment. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. You lied to protect his reputation and his family's benefits. I lied so his family would receive full military honors and financial support, Marcus corrected. Ryan died a hero. I came home alive with a chest full of guilt and a head full of nightmares. Sarah squeezed his hand. No wonder Lucas hates you. In his mind, you got his brother killed, and then came home to live the life Ryan should have had. That doesn't justify what he's done to you and our baby, Marcus said firmly. No, Sarah agreed, but it explains the depth of his anger. The night passed in fitful sleep for both of them. Marcus's dreams were vivid and disturbing. He was back in the Iraqi desert, but instead of explosions, parasites rained from the sky, burrowing into exposed skin while Ryan stood watching. His chest torn open from shrapnel, his eyes filled with accusation rather than forgiveness. He woke gasping to find Morrison sitting in the visitor's chair, his expression grim in the early morning light. We found something, Morrison said without preamble. Lucas's research notes. He didn't just use random soil from Iraq. He specifically cultivated these parasites, selecting for the most aggressive and treatment-resistant strains. Marcus's blood turned to ice water in his veins. He engineered them to be as harmful as possible. It gets worse, Morrison continued. According to his journal entries, there's a critical time window for effective treatment. After that point, the larvae establish themselves in deeper tissues, becoming virtually impossible to eliminate without removing affected body parts entirely. How long? Marcus demanded, though he dreaded the answer. 5 weeks from initial infection, Morrison replied grimly. You're at week 4. That gives us 7 days to find Lucas and extract whatever knowledge he has about treating his specific engineered strain, or you'll likely lose significant function in your arm and shoulder, possibly more if the infection spreads. The countdown had begun. 1 week to find Lucas Torres and force him to reveal the antidote to his deliberately crafted biological weapon. Or Marcus would face amputation and potentially life-threatening systemic infection. Outside his window, dawn broke over Port Meridian, painting the harbor in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere out there, Lucas Wilson was hiding with the knowledge that could save Marcus's arm, and possibly his life. As Sarah slept beside him, her hand protectively cradling her swollen belly even in unconsciousness, Marcus made a silent promise to his unborn child. I'll be whole for you, he whispered into the quiet room. I'll find a way to make this right. Port Meridian General Hospital's 4th floor window offered Marcus a clear view of the harbor, where the search for Lucas Torres continued around the clock. From his vantage point, he could see the flashing lights of Coast Guard vessels scanning the shoreline and the groups of volunteers, many of them veterans from his former unit who had arrived overnight, systematically combing the beaches and forested areas. The morning fog hung low over the Pacific, obscuring the horizon, and giving the entire scene an otherworldly, almost supernatural quality that seemed fitting for the nightmare his life had become. Dr. Hendricks entered the room, her expression grimmer than ever as she studied Marcus's latest test results and imaging scans. The migration patterns are accelerating beyond our projections, she announced without preamble. We've scheduled a surgical consultation for this afternoon with the amputation team. You mean to remove my arm, Marcus stated flatly, no longer able to pretend otherwise. For a comprehensive evaluation of all remaining options, she corrected, though her eyes conveyed the harsh reality. The parasites are approaching critical blood vessels and major nerve clusters. If they breach those barriers, we face the risk of systemic infection that could prove fatal. She hesitated before continuing. I've consulted with specialists at Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, and Walter Reed Medical Center. Without knowing the exact biological composition of what Lucas engineered beyond basic soil samples and parasite identification, we're essentially working blind. Standard treatment protocols have proven completely ineffective against this particular hybrid strain. Marcus looked down at his arm, now grotesquely swollen, with angry red lines tracking beneath the skin like a morbid roadmap of infection. The pain had become his constant companion, dulled only briefly by increasingly powerful medications that left him floating in a haze of artificial calm. How's Sarah progressing? He asked, changing the subject to something he could bear to think about. Stable for now, Doctor, Hendricks replied with cautious optimism. Her infection hasn't advanced as aggressively as yours. We believe her pregnancy hormones may actually be inhibiting parasite development in some unexpected way. It's providing us with valuable research data. A nurse entered with Marcus's scheduled medication, interrupting their conversation. As Dr. Hendricks departed, she promised to return later with the surgical team for what would likely be the final consultation before amputation. The powerful painkillers worked quickly, sending Marcus into a twilight state of consciousness, where past and present blurred together in disturbing combinations. In this half-awake realm, Ryan appeared at his bedside, still dressed in desert camouflage, dust coating his features except for clean tracks where sweat had cut through the grime of their final patrol. You always did get the complicated problems, Rivera, Ryan's apparition said, shaking his head with familiar exasperation. I take one piece of shrapnel. You get invaded by 1,000 tiny enemies engineered specifically for you. I should have told them the truth, Marcus mumbled, unsure if he was speaking aloud or merely thinking the words. About the mission, about you disobeying orders to save my life. Should have let your family know you died a hero by choice, not by following my bad intelligence. And deny my family the benefits, the honor, the flag ceremony. The ghostly Ryan sat on the edge of the hospital bed. That's not who you are, Marcus. But this situation with Lucas, he's lost his way completely. You need to find him. Where would he go? Marcus asked the hallucination, his voice slurred by medication. Where we made our promise. Ryan's image seemed to consider this carefully. The place we swore to bring each other home, no matter what the cost. The medication pulled Marcus deeper into unconsciousness, but the question lingered as he slipped away. Where had he and Ryan made such a promise? He awakened to raised voices in the corridor, outside his room. Morrison and Jake were arguing with someone, a Dr. Marcus didn't recognize, their discussion growing increasingly heated. Absolutely not an acceptable option, the unknown doctor was saying firmly. The ethical implications alone make this impossible to consider. Ethics, Morrison interrupted, his military bearing evident even in civilian clothes. We're talking about a veteran who's going to lose his arm because another man deliberately infected him with weaponized parasites. Where are the ethics in that situation? What's going on? Marcus called out weakly, and the three men entered his room, their heated discussion halting abruptly. Morrison and Jake exchanged meaningful glances before Jake spoke. The surgical team is strongly recommending immediate amputation, Marcus. Mid-shoulder level. They're saying waiting any longer creates unacceptable risk of systemic infection. The new doctor stepped forward, introducing himself. I'm Dr. Lawrence Chen, Chief of Surgery. Mr. Rivera, the parasitic organisms have begun causing significant damage to blood vessels, nerve pathways, and muscle tissue. Even if we could somehow eliminate them at this advanced stage, the structural damage to your arm and shoulder is already extensive. Marcus felt strangely detached, as if he were floating above the scene, observing someone else's medical crisis. And Sarah, how is her condition affecting our baby, Mrs. Rivera's case continues responding to treatment, Doctor. Chen replied, but yours is advancing at a rate that's frankly unprecedented in medical literature. We believe you received a much more concentrated exposure through direct bloodstream introduction. Morrison moved closer to the bed, his expression determined. Marcus, we have people searching everywhere for Lucas. The entire veteran community is mobilized, but we need to buy more time before they force this surgery. What are you suggesting? Marcus asked, noting the obvious tension between Morrison and the surgeon. An experimental treatment protocol, Morrison said firmly. A former combat medic from our unit is now a parasitologist at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. He's developed procedures for similar cases from Iraq and Afghanistan. It's not FDA approved for civilian use, but it's shown promising results. Doctor. Chen shook his head vigorously. It's extremely risky and completely untested for this type of engineered parasite strain. Without proper approval, I cannot and will not authorize such treatment. I don't care about bureaucratic approval, Marcus interrupted, his voice strengthening with determination. I care about keeping my arm functional so I can hold my child when they're born, so I can support Sarah through delivery and recovery. He turned to Morrison directly. What exactly does this treatment involve? Localized cryotherapy combined with targeted ultrasonic disruption, Morrison explained. It won't kill the parasites outright, but it should significantly slow their movement and reproduction, possibly freezing them in place long enough for us to locate Lucas and obtain the specific neutralization protocol he developed. Doctor. Chen looked alarmed. The tissue damage from that procedure alone could necessitate amputation anyway. You'd be trading one major risk for another with absolutely no guarantee of success. How much time would it buy me? Marcus asked Morrison directly. Maybe 72 hours, Morrison admitted honestly. But that could be enough time for our search teams to find Lucas and force him to provide the antidote he created. Marcus didn't hesitate for even a moment. "Do it. I need to consult with hospital administration, doctor." Chen objected. "There are massive liability issues involved in authorizing experimental military medical procedures. My husband is a combat veteran with a documented service-connected medical condition," came Sarah's voice from the doorway. She stood there in her hospital gown, one hand supporting her pregnant belly, the other gripping an IV pole for stability. Under Veterans Affairs medical emergency protocols, Staff Sergeant Morrison can authorize experimental treatment for active service-related conditions. Doctor. Chen looked startled, but Morrison nodded with grim satisfaction. "She's absolutely correct. I've already contacted the VA Regional Medical Director. The emergency authorization paperwork is being processed as we speak." While the medical staff continued their heated debate about protocols and liability, Jake slipped closer to Marcus's bedside. "I need to tell you something important," he whispered urgently. "When you were unconscious earlier, you kept mentioning some kind of promise and Beacon Point Lighthouse. Does that mean anything specific to you?" Marcus's eyes widened as fragments of his medication-induced conversation with Ryan's ghost suddenly crystallized into perfect clarity. "The lighthouse keeper's cottage. Ryan and I made a blood pact there the night before we deployed overseas. We swore to bring each other home no matter what happened, no matter what the cost." Jake straightened immediately. "Beacon Point Lighthouse. That structure's been abandoned for over a decade. Most people have completely forgotten about it." "Not abandoned," Marcus corrected, understanding flooding through him. "Just forgotten by casual visitors. Ryan and I used to camp there as teenagers, exploring the old keeper's quarters and storage areas. Lucas knew about our connection to that place too. We used to bring him along sometimes when we were all kids." Morrison immediately stepped away from the argument with Dr. Chen to make urgent phone calls, organizing a focused search party for the lighthouse area. Meanwhile, the medical team began preparations for Marcus's experimental treatment. A flurry of activity surrounded his bed as specialized equipment was wheeled in, and detailed consent forms were presented for his signature, documenting the experimental nature and significant risks of the procedure. As the doctors prepared to begin, Sarah approached Marcus's bedside, her face pale with worry but her eyes filled with fierce determination. "You know what Ryan would say if he could see you right now." Marcus managed a weak smile despite the circumstances. "Probably something like, 'Suck it up, Rivera. I took shrapnel to the chest. You can handle a few engineered worms.'" Sarah's laugh held a mixture of tears and genuine affection. "Exactly that. He'd probably also remind you that you've survived worse, and that you have something worth fighting for now." The procedure proved to be absolutely excruciating despite heavy sedation. The combination of extreme cold and precisely targeted ultrasonic waves sent shock waves of agony through Marcus's entire upper body. He drifted in and out of consciousness, his mind seeking refuge in memories of Iraq, not the horrible final bombing, but the quieter moments between missions. Ryan teaching local children to play baseball with makeshift equipment fashioned from scrap materials, sharing care packages from home under brilliant desert stars, planning futures that seemed so certain then, futures that only one of them would survive to experience. When Marcus finally emerged from sedation hours later, the burning pain in his arm had transformed from sharp, shooting agony to a deep, throbbing ache that seemed to penetrate his bones. Dr. Hendricks looked cautiously optimistic as she examined the latest imaging scans. The procedure appears to have achieved our primary objective, at least temporarily, she reported with careful professional optimism. Parasitic movement has slowed dramatically, and their reproduction rate has decreased significantly. But she hesitated before continuing, and Marcus knew there was more difficult news. However, the tissue damage throughout the affected area is quite extensive. We may have successfully slowed the parasites, but we're still facing significant necrosis in multiple tissue layers. Translation, Marcus asked, though he suspected he already understood. We've bought you time, but possibly not enough to save full function of your arm and shoulder. Even if we eliminate every parasite, you're likely facing months of reconstructive surgery and physical therapy, with no guarantee of returning to normal strength and mobility. Marcus nodded his understanding, just as his hospital room door burst open with sudden urgency. Morrison entered, looking simultaneously triumphant and grimly determined. We found Lucas's base of operations, he announced breathlessly. A makeshift laboratory set up in an abandoned boathouse near Beacon Point Lighthouse. Research notes, cultivation equipment, parasite cultures, everything we hoped to find. And Lucas himself, Marcus asked, though he could already read the answer in Morrison's expression. Morrison shook his head. No direct sign of him yet, but the lighthouse keeper's cottage shows clear evidence of recent occupation. Food supplies, sleeping gear, personal belongings. He can't have gone far from that location, Doctor. Hendricks immediately showed intense interest. His research materials could provide exactly what we need. His notes might tell us precisely what we're dealing with, and more importantly, how to neutralize these engineered organisms. As Morrison and Dr. Hendricks departed to examine Lucas's findings, Marcus was left alone with his thoughts and the temporary reprieve from advancing parasites. The experimental treatment had cleared his mind somewhat, allowing him to consider Lucas's actions with greater analytical clarity. This wasn't simply about grief or misplaced blame for Ryan's death. The methodical nature of the infection, the carefully engineered parasites, the specific geographical targeting, all of it pointed to calculated revenge, executed with scientific precision and years of planning. A soft tap at the door interrupted his contemplation. A nurse entered with news that made his heart race with fear and anticipation. Sarah had been moved to the delivery room. The stress of her infection, combined with the emotional trauma of Marcus's condition, had triggered premature labor that could no longer be medically prevented. But she's only 32 weeks along, Marcus protested, already struggling to rise from his hospital bed despite the restraints and monitoring equipment. The medical team is doing everything possible, the nurse assured him with professional calm. We have neonatal specialists standing by, and our NICU is well equipped for premature deliveries. But you need to prepare yourself mentally. This is happening now, whether we're ready or not. Despite strong protests from his medical team, Marcus insisted on being transported to a room adjacent to the delivery area, where he could at least see Sarah through observation windows. They compromised by carefully moving his entire bed setup, including all monitoring equipment and IV lines, to a position where he could maintain visual contact with her. The sight of Sarah contorted in pain, her face flushed with fever as she fought through increasingly intense contractions, twisted something deep and primal inside Marcus's chest. This should have been a joyful time, the culmination of months of anticipation and preparation, not a desperate battle for survival involving mother, child, and father. Through the observation window, Sarah's eyes met his across the medical chaos surrounding her bed. Despite everything she was enduring, she managed to form words he could read on her lips. Not your fault. But it was his fault, in ways she couldn't fully understand or appreciate. If he had told the complete truth years ago about Ryan's death, about the circumstances of their final mission, perhaps Lucas's grief wouldn't have fermented into this poisonous need for revenge. If he had been more observant during the tattooing session, questioned the strange powder Lucas mixed into the ink, demanded explanations for his probing questions about Ryan's final moments. So many critical moments where different choices might have prevented this nightmare from unfolding. A commotion in the corridor outside drew Marcus's attention. Raised voices, hurried footsteps, and then his door burst open again. 2 police officers escorted a haggard, unshaven man, whose wrists were secured in handcuffs behind his back. Lucas Torres looked nothing like the composed, professional artist who had tattooed Marcus 5 weeks earlier. His clothes were filthy and torn, his hair matted, his eyes wild with a combination of physical exhaustion and emotional defiance. But when his gaze fixed on Marcus, then traveled to the observation window where Sarah was clearly visible in medical distress, something shifted dramatically in his expression. They found him trying to steal a fishing boat at the South Marina, one officer explained, apparently planning to head up the coast, maybe to Canada. Lucas's stare moved from Marcus to the delivery room window, taking in the scene of medical emergency surrounding Sarah. Something flickered across his face that looked like genuine surprise, even dismay. The pregnant woman wasn't supposed to be affected, he said, his first words since being captured. The parasite concentration was calculated specifically for your body mass and metabolism. The transfer to her was never part of the plan. Well, your calculations were catastrophically wrong, Marcus replied, struggling to contain the rage building in his chest. She's in premature labor right now, and our baby might not survive because of your need for revenge. Lucas visibly paled, his shoulders slumping as the full implications of his actions hit him. I never intended for innocents to suffer. My argument was with you specifically, not with her or an unborn child. Doctor. Hendricks entered with Morrison, both looking grimly determined, but carrying folders that suggested they had found something significant in Lucas's research materials. Lucas Torres, Doctor. Hendricks began formally. We've reviewed your research materials and laboratory setup. You've cultivated a specific strain of Necator americanus, modified with soil bacteria from Anbar province, Iraq. This hospital is prepared to file charges of attempted murder and bioterrorism. But right now, we desperately need your cooperation to save Mr. Rivera's arm and potentially Mrs. Rivera's baby. Lucas looked from the doctor to Marcus, then back to Sarah, struggling through another contraction visible through the observation window. Something seemed to break inside him, the vindictive shell cracking to reveal the grieving brother hidden beneath. "There's an enzymatic neutralization solution in the blue laboratory refrigerator at the lighthouse facility," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. "It's clearly labeled as neutralizing agent batch 7. He paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "I always intended to offer it to you eventually, after you had suffered enough to truly understand what Ryan went through. After you had experienced the same helplessness he must have felt bleeding out in that Iraqi desert." Morrison was already on his phone, directing the search team at the lighthouse to locate the refrigerator and retrieve the neutralizing solution immediately. Dr. Hendricks pressed Lucas for crucial details about the solution's chemical composition and proper administration protocols. As this flurry of life-saving activity continued around him, Marcus's attention remained fixed on Sarah through the observation window. The medical team surrounding her had grown larger, their expressions increasingly concerned, and one doctor was clearly preparing emergency cesarean equipment in case natural delivery became impossible or too dangerous. "Something's going wrong," Marcus said, interrupting the interrogation of Lucas. "With Sarah with the baby, the situation is deteriorating." Lucas followed his gaze, watching the medical emergency unfold through the observation window, his face contorting with sudden, overwhelming anguish. "I never wanted this," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else in the room. "Ryan would be ashamed of what I've done, of how far I let my grief and anger carry me." For the first time since his capture, Lucas addressed Marcus directly, his voice breaking with emotion. "I read his letters, you know, the ones he sent to you that were returned after his death. He wrote about how you tried to stop that mission, how you argued with your lieutenant about the intelligence reports. He wrote that if anything happened to him, I shouldn't blame you for following orders." Thomas's eyes filled with tears as he continued. "But it was so much easier to hate you than to accept that his death was just meaningless, just another casualty of war with no one specific to blame." Before Marcus could respond to this confession, alarms began blaring in the delivery room. Through the observation window, he watched doctors rushing around Sarah with urgent, coordinated movements, while her monitors flashed red warning signals. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not Lucas's belated confession, not the parasites slowly destroying his arm, not the years of guilt he had carried since Iraq. All that existed was his wife fighting for her life and their child's survival. "Save them," he pleaded to anyone who would listen, his voice breaking with desperation. "Forget about me, forget about revenge, forget about everything else. Just save my wife and child." The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across the hospital corridor as Marcus watched helplessly from his bed. Through the observation window, a full medical team surrounded Sarah, their movements urgent but precisely coordinated. He could see her face, pale and drawn with pain, as an oxygen mask was placed over her nose and mouth to assist her breathing. A nurse pulled privacy curtains across the window, cutting off his view and leaving him in a state of terrified uncertainty about what was happening to his family. Lucas stood motionless between the police officers, his expression hollow as he witnessed the chaos his carefully planned revenge had created. "I never intended this," he repeated, his voice barely audible above the medical alarms. "It was supposed to be targeted, controlled, just enough suffering to make you understand what loss feels like." Marcus could barely hear him through the roaring panic in his ears. His focus remained fixed on the now obscured window, straining to catch any glimpse, any sign of what was happening to Sarah and their unborn child. "Doctor," Hendricks rushed back into the room, slightly out of breath. "The neutralizing agent is being transported from the lighthouse laboratory as we speak," she reported with urgent efficiency. "But we need to know exactly how to administer it safely." "Mr. Torres, this is absolutely critical." Lucas seemed to snap back to the present moment, his scientific mind engaging despite his emotional turmoil. "Direct topical application to all affected skin areas, followed by intravenous administration of the diluted solution," he explained, his voice steadying with professional knowledge. "The surface parasites will die within minutes. The deeper organisms will take several hours, but the progression will halt immediately." "What about administration to a pregnant woman, doctor?" Hendricks pressed with obvious concern. "Are there any risks to the developing fetus?" Lucas's face grew even paler. "I never tested the neutralizing agent in that context. The enzymatic components should be biologically safe, but the concentrated antibodies." He trailed off, the full weight of his oversight crushing him visibly. "We'll have to proceed with extreme caution for Mrs. Rivera, doctor," Hendricks decided. "But for Mr. Rivera, we'll begin treatment the moment the solution arrives." The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Marcus's arm throbbed with each heartbeat, the experimental treatment wearing thin against the relentless assault of the engineered parasites. But the physical pain seemed insignificant compared to the agony of not knowing what was happening behind those closed curtains. "Let me see my wife," he demanded, attempting to swing his legs over the side of the hospital bed. The sudden movement sent waves of dizziness crashing over him, his body weakened by weeks of infection and powerful medications. "You're in no condition to be moved again, doctor," Hendricks began. "I don't care about my condition," Marcus interrupted, his voice raw with desperation. "If something happens to Sarah or our baby and I'm not there, I'll never forgive myself." Before Dr. Hendricks could respond, Morrison burst into the room clutching a small, insulated medical container. "We've got it," he announced breathlessly. "The neutralizing agent, exactly where Lucas said it would be, doctor." Hendricks immediately examined the container's contents. Several vials of clear, slightly bluish liquid, with detailed labels indicating concentration levels and dilution instructions. She turned to Lucas for confirmation. "That's it," he nodded, his voice hollow. "The concentration ratios are marked on each vial. You'll need to dilute the intravenous solution by exactly half with sterile saline solution." As the medical team began preparations to administer the potentially life-saving treatment, the curtains across the observation window suddenly pulled back. A doctor emerged from Sarah's room and approached Marcus's door, his surgical mask pulled down, his expression grave but not hopeless. "Mr. Rivera," he began with careful professional composure, "we've had to perform an emergency cesarean section. Your son has been delivered at 32 weeks gestation. He weighs just over 3 pounds and is experiencing some respiratory distress, which is completely expected for a premature infant of his gestational age. He's being transferred immediately to our neonatal intensive care unit. Marcus felt his world tilting on its axis. And Sarah? How is Sarah, Mrs.? Rivera experienced significant blood pressure fluctuations during the delivery, complicated by her parasitic infection and the stress it placed on her cardiovascular system. We're working to stabilize her condition now, but she's currently in serious but stable condition. The next 24 to 48 hours will be critical for both mother and child. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His son, tiny and struggling for breath, fighting to live before Marcus had even had a chance to hold him. Sarah lying somewhere beyond that window, battling an infection meant specifically for him. All because of one man's twisted interpretation of justice and fair payment for wartime losses. Rage surged through Marcus, hot and clarifying, burning away the fog of pain medication and fear. He turned to Lucas, who had sunk into a chair, his handcuffed wrists limp in his lap, his entire body language reflecting complete defeat. "Look at what your need for revenge has accomplished," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet, but carrying the weight of absolute judgment. "Not just what you've done to me, but to an innocent woman and a newborn baby fighting for his life. Was this worth it? Did this bring Ryan back? Did this heal your grief?" Lucas couldn't meet his eyes, staring instead at the floor. "I spent 3 years planning this," he whispered. 3 years researching parasite cultivation, studying their life cycles, calculating exactly how much suffering they would cause before. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Before what?" Marcus demanded, though part of him already knew the answer. "Before I offered you the cure," Lucas admitted, his voice barely audible. "I wanted you to experience the same helplessness Ryan must have felt dying in that desert. I wanted you to beg for relief that wouldn't come quickly enough. But I never meant for anyone else to be hurt." A bitter laugh escaped Marcus. "Just like I never meant for Ryan to die taking shrapnel meant for me. Just like I never meant for his family to believe a lie about how heroically he died, following my tactical recommendations. We're both guilty of intentions that spiraled completely beyond our control, Lucas." The medical team had finished preparing the neutralizing agent and now approached Marcus's bed with professional efficiency. "Doctor," Hendricks supervised as another doctor began carefully removing the bandages from Marcus's grotesquely swollen arm, revealing the full horror of what lay beneath. The skin was angry red, crisscrossed with raised tracks where the parasites had tunneled and migrated. In some areas, the tissue had begun to darken with necrosis, and the entire limb was visibly swollen to nearly twice its normal size. Lucas turned away, unable to look directly at what he had created. "I had the cure available all along," he said, his voice hollow with self-loathing. "I could have stopped this progression at any point during these past weeks. Mr. Tor's doctor," Hendricks addressed him sharply. "Instead of wallowing in guilt that helps no one, perhaps you could make yourself useful. We need to know exactly how this neutralizing agent will interact with the parasites, what kind of reactions to expect, and how to properly adjust dosages for misses. Rivera's condition and pregnancy. Lucas straightened slightly, professional medical knowledge momentarily overriding his emotional collapse. He approached the bed cautiously, examining Marcus's infected arm with clinical detachment, despite the obvious horror of what he was seeing. The topical application will cause the parasites to convulse violently before dying, he explained with scientific precision. It will be extremely painful as they thrash beneath the skin tissue. The intravenous solution works more gradually, targeting the deeper larvae over 12 to 24 hours. Doctor. Hendricks nodded, making notes. We'll need to administer maximum pain management during the treatment. No, Marcus interrupted firmly. No heavy sedation. I need to remain alert and conscious for Sarah and the baby. Before anyone could argue with his decision, a nurse entered with an update that made his heart race. Mrs. Rivera is asking for her husband. She's conscious and her vital signs have stabilized somewhat. Despite medical objections about the timing, Marcus insisted on seeing Sarah before his treatment began. Lucas watched silently as Marcus was carefully transferred to a wheelchair, his infected arm supported on a specialized pillow to minimize movement and pain. As Marcus was about to be wheeled out of the room, he turned to Lucas one final time. Ryan told me something once, after we'd been through a particularly brutal firefight. He said the dead are gone, Rivera. We carry them with us in our hearts and memories, but we don't follow them down into the grave. He wouldn't want this, Lucas. Not any of it. And Lucas seemed to age years in that single moment, his shoulders slumping under the unbearable weight of his brother's imagined disappointment. I know, he whispered, his voice breaking. Too late to change anything, but I know. Sarah lay pale against the white hospital sheets, an array of monitoring equipment surrounding her bed like electronic sentinels. When Marcus entered the room, her exhausted but determined eyes found his immediately. Our son, she said, her voice weak, but urgent despite her obvious fatigue. Have you seen him yet? Marcus shook his head, positioning his wheelchair beside her bed. They took him straight to the NICU. The doctors say he's fighting, that he's stronger than his size suggests. Of course he is. Sarah managed a fragile smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. He's your son. He's a Rivera. We don't give up easily. Marcus took her hand carefully, mindful not to disturb the IV lines and monitoring cables. I'm so sorry, Sarah. All of this nightmare is because of choices I made, lies I told, guilt I carried home from Iraq. Stop, she interrupted with unexpected firmness despite her weakened condition. This isn't your fault. It's not even really Lucas's fault, not entirely. It's war, Marcus. The war followed you home, that's all. Some wounds never heal properly, and sometimes they poison everything around them. Her simple, direct absolution undid him completely. Tears he had been holding back since Afghanistan, since Ryan's death, since his return home, finally broke free, tracking silently down his face. I never told you the complete truth about Ryan, about how he really died, he confessed. I know, she whispered, surprising him. Morrison showed me some of the letters after they found them. I know you protected Ryan's memory, took responsibility to preserve his family's honor and benefits. And look where that choice led us, Marcus said bitterly. Sarah's eyes drifted closed as fatigue overwhelmed her again. "We need to name him," she murmured softly. "Ryan," Marcus said without hesitation, "if that's acceptable to you." A small, peaceful smile touched Sarah's lips as she slipped toward sleep. Ryan Rivera. He would be honored. As Sarah rested, a nurse entered to inform Marcus that they were ready to begin his treatment immediately. The NICU doctor would allow him a brief visit with his son afterward, regardless of his condition, following the neutralizing procedure. Marcus took one final look at Sarah before allowing himself to be wheeled back to his room. In the corridor, he passed Lucas, now being escorted by police officers toward the hospital exit and eventual jail processing. Their eyes met briefly. One man broken by grief that had curdled into destructive revenge. The other tempered by suffering that had somehow not destroyed his capacity for forgiveness and hope. No words passed between them, but something shifted in that silent exchange. Not forgiveness, it was far too soon for that level of healing, but perhaps the first fragile recognition that they were bound together not just by Ryan's death, but by their shared, flawed humanity. Both desperately imperfect, both capable of terrible choices, but both ultimately painfully human. The application of Lucas's neutralizing agent proved to be every bit as excruciating as he had warned. Marcus gripped the hospital bed rails with his functional hand. His jaw clenched so tightly he feared his teeth might shatter. As the solution was applied directly to his infected arm and shoulder. Beneath his skin, the parasites reacted with violent, desperate thrashing, creating visible rippling movements that made everyone in the room visibly uncomfortable. The sensation was indescribable. Thousands of tiny creatures convulsing and dying just beneath the surface of his skin, each death spasm sending waves of agony through already damaged tissue. Dr. Hendricks maintained a steady stream of clinical observations, but Marcus barely heard her through the fog of overwhelming pain. The superficial parasites are responding exactly as predicted, she noted, her voice seeming to come from miles away. The inflammation is already beginning to subside in the treated areas. Morrison stood at the foot of the bed, his military bearing softened by genuine concern for his former subordinate. "Hang in there, Rivera. You've survived worse than this," had he, though. In Iraq, pain had been accompanied by adrenaline, by the survival instinct, by the immediate need to act and react. This was different. A controlled, deliberate agony in the sterile safety of a hospital room, with nothing to do but endure each second as it crawled past. As the initial topical treatment concluded, and the intravenous solution began dripping into his bloodstream, Marcus's thoughts drifted to the NICU, where his son fought his own battle for survival. A 3-pound warrior who had entered the world amidst chaos and medical emergency, not of his own making. "I need to see my son," Marcus insisted, as the worst of the initial pain began to ebb slightly. Dr. Hendricks hesitated. "The IV treatment needs careful monitoring for the first several hours. Any adverse reaction could be life-threatening." "I don't care," Marcus replied with quiet determination. "Will the IV stand alongside me if necessary, but I'm going to see my son." Perhaps it was the steel in his voice, or perhaps the medical team simply recognized the therapeutic value of his request, but they relented. A nurse carefully arranged his IV lines, while an orderly prepared to transport his entire bed setup toward the NICU. Before they moved him, Dr. Hendricks provided a cautiously optimistic update. The initial response is very promising, but I need to be completely clear with you. We're not out of danger yet. Even if we eliminate all the parasites successfully, the tissue damage may prove irreversible in some areas. There will likely be permanent scarring, possible nerve damage, and potential mobility limitations. But I'll keep the arm, Marcus asked directly. I believe so, yes, she answered, though uncertainty colored her voice. Its full functionality remains questionable. It was enough for now. One battle at a time, one small victory building toward something larger. The NICU existed in a different reality from the rest of the hospital. A hushed, controlled environment where the smallest humans fought the biggest battles for survival. Through the observation window, Marcus saw rows of clear incubators, each containing a tiny life connected to machines that seemed to dwarf their fragile bodies. A neonatologist met them at the entrance, her expression carefully neutral in the way medical professionals adopt when dealing with critical situations. Mr. Rivera, your son is stable but critical. He's on mechanical ventilation to assist his breathing, and we're monitoring him closely for any signs of infection or complications. I need to prepare you for what you'll see. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Premature infants at 32 weeks are very small and appear quite different from full-term babies. But I want you to know that babies born at this gestational age have excellent survival rates with proper medical care. Marcus nodded, bracing himself as they positioned his bed alongside a clear plastic incubator in the corner of the intensive care unit. Nothing could have truly prepared him for his first sight of his son. The baby was impossibly tiny, his translucent skin revealing a delicate network of blue veins. His chest rose and fell with mechanical assistance from the ventilator, eyes still fused shut in a face that seemed almost too small to be human. Tubes and wires connected his miniature body to monitors and machines that beeped with steady, reassuring rhythm. "Can I touch him?" Marcus asked, his voice catching with overwhelming emotion. The neonatologist nodded. There are access ports in the side of the incubator. You can place your hand inside. Physical contact is extremely important for his development, even at this early stage. With his functional hand, Marcus reached carefully through the circular opening in the incubator's side. His large finger looked enormous next to his son's tiny form. With infinite gentleness, he touched the baby's hand, no larger than his thumbnail. To his amazement and heart-stopping emotion, those miniature fingers reflexively curled around his fingertip with surprising strength. "Hey there, Ryan," he whispered, tears blurring his vision. "I'm your dad. You're going to be okay. We're all going to be okay." In that moment, something shifted permanently inside Marcus. The rage he had felt toward Lucas Torres, the bitterness about his own suffering, the years of guilt about the original Ryan's death, none of it vanished completely, but all of it receded behind a new, fierce priority. This tiny being who depended on him completely, who needed him to be whole and present and strong. The neonatologist allowed him 15 precious minutes before insisting. He returned to his room for continued monitoring of his treatment. Those 15 minutes altered the landscape of Marcus's life more profoundly than any battlefield experience or moment of crisis he had ever endured. Back in his hospital room, a surprise awaited him. Roberto Rivera stood awkwardly by the window, his weathered captain's hat clutched in his hands, just as it had been days earlier when Marcus had first been admitted. "Dad," Marcus acknowledged, surprise evident in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you here." Roberto cleared his throat, uncomfortable with emotional expressions, but determined to be present. "Heard I have a grandson. Tiny little fighter, they tell me. 3 pounds 1 ounce, Marcus confirmed. "We named him Ryan." His father nodded, absorbing this information with characteristic reserve. "Good name. Strong name. He'll grow into it." Roberto gestured toward Marcus's arm, now less grotesquely swollen, but still bearing the obvious marks of his ordeal. "And this business with the Tours fellow. They say he brought the antidote himself." "He did," Marcus confirmed. "The same hand that caused the suffering provided the cure." Roberto's weathered face darkened with anger. "That man should spend the rest of his life in prison for what he did to you, to Sarah, to that innocent baby." "Probably," Marcus agreed. "But it's more complicated than simple justice, Dad. Grief does terrible things to people. Makes them create enemies they can focus on, narratives they can live with." Before he could elaborate further, Jake entered the room carrying a worn leather journal. "The police released some more of Lucas's research materials," he explained, placing it on Marcus's bed. "I think you should see the final entries." The journal contained months of additional entries documenting Lucas's psychological journey from grief through obsession to the final decision to act on his need for revenge. But the most revealing passages came from the weeks immediately before Marcus's tattoo appointment, after Lucas had received and read Ryan's letters. April 10th. Read Ryan's letters to Rivera again. Keep trying to reconcile what my brother wrote with the official story I've believed for 3 years. Ryan clearly trusted Rivera, warned him about the mission, said Rivera tried to stop it from happening. If that's true, why did the military report say it was Rivera's intelligence that led them into that ambush? Someone is lying, and I need to know the truth before I proceed with my plan. May 2nd. Met with Staff Sergeant Morrison today. He confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. Rivera took the blame to protect Ryan's posthumous reputation and ensure our family received full military benefits. Said it was what Marines do for each other, what brothers in arms do. Doesn't change that Rivera came home alive, and Ryan came home in a flag-draped coffin. Doesn't erase these 3 years of hating him for something he apparently didn't do. What am I supposed to do with that knowledge? The final entry, dated just 1 day before Marcus's tattoo appointment, revealed Lucas's completely conflicted state of mind. May 23rd. The parasite cultures have reached optimal maturity. Rivera's appointment is tomorrow morning. Part of me wants to call this off entirely. Ryan's letters make it clear he wouldn't want this kind of revenge. But I've come too far, invested too much time in planning to stop now. I've designed the neutralizing agent to allow for complete recovery after sufficient suffering. He won't die, but he'll understand what helplessness feels like, what watching someone you love suffer feels like. Maybe then I can finally let Ryan rest in peace. Marcus closed the journal, his mind reeling with the implications. Lucas had known the truth about Marcus's innocence before he had ever applied the contaminated ink to his skin. He had proceeded despite his brother's letters, specifically absolving Marcus of responsibility for the deadly mission. Yet he had also created the cure in advance, apparently never intending permanent harm or death, at least not initially. He knew, Marcus said quietly. He knew I wasn't responsible for Ryan's death, but he infected me anyway because he needed someone to blame, someone to punish. Grief makes people create the enemies they need, Jake offered. Makes them construct narratives they can live with, even when they know those stories aren't entirely true. Doctor. Hendricks entered with unexpectedly positive news. Lucas Torres has been cooperating extensively with our medical team, she reported. He's provided detailed information about the parasite strain, optimal treatment protocols, and potential long-term effects. Based on his guidance, we've been able to refine our approach for Sarah, and her infection is showing significant improvement. And Lucas himself, Marcus asked. Where is he now? In police custody at the county jail, she replied. But he's made a specific request through his attorney. He wants to see you, Mr. Rivera, before he's formally processed and charged. The request hung in the air, heavy with unresolved tension and the weight of everything that had passed between them. Jake immediately objected to any meeting, but Marcus raised his hand to silence the protest. Did he say why he wants to see me? No, doctor. Hendricks answered, but he did provide something else that might interest you. Additional research documenting how these parasites affect neurological tissue damaged by combat trauma. It appears there may be unexpected beneficial properties in how they interact with neural pathways affected by PTSD. Marcus struggled to comprehend what she was suggesting. Are you saying that while these parasites were destroying my arm, they might actually have been helping repair my brain? It's preliminary and completely untested, doctor. Hendricks cautioned, but Lucas's research suggests the inflammatory response triggers protein production that can rebuild certain damaged neural connections. He claims it was part of his original plan. Punishment followed by a form of psychological healing and redemption. Marcus stared at his arm, where the angry red tracks were already beginning to fade into what would become permanent but less dramatic scars. He wounded me to heal me. That's completely insane. Perhaps, doctor. Hendricks acknowledged. Or perhaps it's the desperate rationalization of a man who needed his revenge to mean something more than just causing pain. Either way, we're continuing to monitor both you and Sarah for any neurological effects, positive or negative. As the doctor departed, Marcus found himself contemplating Lucas's request for a meeting. What could possibly be said between them now that would matter? What words could bridge the gap between deliberate harm and reluctant healing? 1 year later, the Oregon coastline glittered under perfect June sunshine. Marcus sat on a weathered bench overlooking Port Meridian Harbor, his right arm cradling baby Ryan, now a healthy 14-month-old with his mother's bright eyes, and a determination that reminded everyone of his father. The scars on Marcus's left arm had faded from angry red to silvery white, forming an intricate pattern around the remains of the original Ryan's name. Still legible, though now part of a larger tapestry of healed tissue. The nerve damage had been permanent in some areas, leaving patches of numbness and a slight tremor when he was tired. But he had regained nearly 85% of normal function, far more than the doctors had initially predicted. "He's getting heavy," Sarah observed, settling beside them with a picnic basket. She wore a summer dress that fluttered in the ocean breeze, her own faint scars visible only to those who knew to look for them. "Good thing all that physical therapy paid off. Worth every painful session," Marcus replied, flexing his fingers to demonstrate their restored mobility. The months of rehabilitation had been grueling, but the motivation of holding his son had driven him through every exercise, every small improvement. Little Ryan squirmed in his arms, reaching for the toy sailboat Sarah produced from her bag. The boy's early struggles in the NICU seemed like a distant nightmare now, though monthly checkups at Oregon Health and Science University served as reminders of how close they had come to losing him. "Ready to head down to the ceremony?" Sarah asked, checking her watch. "It starts in 20 minutes. Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful as he gazed toward the harbor where boats were gathering for the dedication of Port Meridian's new Veteran Support Center. What had begun as a community rally around one wounded veteran had evolved into something permanent. A place where returning service members could find counseling, job placement assistance, and the understanding that only those who had served could truly provide. As they made their way down the winding path to the harbor, Marcus spotted his father's distinctive figure standing near the renovated building that would house the center. Roberto Rivera had surprised everyone, including himself, by becoming one of the project's most vocal supporters, donating both money and countless hours of manual labor to the renovation efforts. "There's my grandson," Roberto called out, his weathered face breaking into an uncharacteristic grin as they approached. The relationship between the crusty sea captain and his infant grandson had been immediate and profound, healing rifts between father and son that had seemed permanent. "He's been asking for his grandpa all morning," Sarah teased, transferring the squirming toddler to Roberto's eager arms. The harbor area had been transformed for the dedication ceremony. Rows of chairs faced a small stage draped with American flags, while tables laden with food prepared by local restaurants lined the waterfront. Familiar faces from Marcus's army unit mingled with townspeople, many wearing ribbons in military colors. Jake approached, looking unusually formal in a button-down shirt, rather than his customary tattoo parlor attire. "The press is already here," he informed them, including some national outlets. This story really struck a chord with people. "Not exactly how I planned to become famous," Marcus remarked with dry humor. "Famous enough to help change policy," Jake reminded him. "The VA's new parasite screening protocols for returning personnel wouldn't exist without your case." It was true. The discovery of how Lucas's engineered parasites had unexpectedly interacted with Marcus's PTSD, affected neural pathways, had launched multiple research studies. While the method had been unconscionable, the medical findings were undeniable. Marcus's night terrors and hypervigilance had diminished significantly in the months following treatment. Similar beneficial effects had been noted in Sarah, whose previously undiagnosed anxiety disorder had shown marked improvement. Dr. Rodriguez spotted them from across the gathering and made her way over, accompanied by Dr. Hendricks, who had remained involved in their case long after returning to her Portland practice. Our guests of honor, Dr. Rodriguez greeted them warmly. "How's our miracle baby doing today?" Terrorizing the cat and trying to eat everything he can reach. Sarah replied with the weary pride of a mother navigating toddlerhood. "Sounds perfectly normal, Doctor." Hendricks smiled, then examined Marcus's arm with professional interest. "The scarring continues to improve. Any changes in sensation or mobility?" "I can feel pressure in most areas now," Marcus reported. "Still can't detect temperature differences in these two spots." He indicated areas near his wrist and inner elbow. "But overall function is better than anyone predicted." "That's consistent with our other research subjects, Doctor." Hendricks nodded. Of the 23 veterans who had voluntarily undergone a medically controlled version of the treatment protocol developed from Lucas's research, all had shown similar patterns of recovery, both physical and psychological. As the crowd began taking seats for the ceremony, Marcus spotted a familiar figure standing at the periphery of the gathering. Partially obscured by a large oak tree, the sight of Lucas' tours still evoked a complex mixture of emotions: anger and gratitude, resentment and understanding, all impossibly tangled together. Lucas looked older than his 37 years, his shoulders bearing the weight of his electronic monitoring ankle bracelet. The terms of his house arrest and community service allowed him to attend the ceremony. His first public appearance since the highly publicized trial where Marcus's testimony had helped secure a reduced sentence in exchange for Lucas's full cooperation with medical research. Their eyes met across the gathering, and after a moment's hesitation, Lucas raised his hand in a tentative greeting. Marcus returned the gesture, though he made no move to approach. Their relationship existed in a strange limbo. Neither friendship nor pure enmity, but something undefined that acknowledged their permanent connection through both tragedy and unexpected healing. The ceremony began with remarks from local officials, followed by Morrison speaking on behalf of the veteran community. When it came time for Marcus to address the crowd, he handed baby Ryan to Sarah and made his way to the podium, only the slightest stiffness in his gait serving as a visible reminder of his ordeal. "A year ago," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed gathering, "I lay in a hospital bed watching parasites destroy my arm, uncertain if I would live to hold the son I hadn't yet met. Today I stand before you whole, scarred but functional, changed but not broken." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the familiar faces of his community, lingering briefly on Lucas at the periphery. "This center represents something I learned during my recovery, that wounds come in many forms, and healing rarely follows a straight path. Sometimes the deepest injuries are invisible, and sometimes the most unlikely sources provide our salvation." Marcus rolled up his sleeve, revealing the silvery scars that now formed an intricate pattern around Ryan Tor's name. "I carry these marks as reminders, not just of suffering, but of resilience. They tell a story of how pain can transform us if we allow it to, how even our deepest grievances might eventually lead to understanding and growth." From the edge of the crowd, Lucas listened with barely contained emotion. The man who had orchestrated Marcus's suffering had also inadvertently pioneered a treatment that was now helping dozens of veterans struggling with combat-related trauma. The ethical complexities remained impossible to untangle neatly. After the ceremony concluded, Marcus found himself standing at the shoreline, baby Ryan asleep against his shoulder, despite the applause and conversation continuing behind them. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the harbor, painting the fishing boats in shades of gold and amber. "He has Ryan's eyes," came a quiet voice beside him. Thomas had approached silently, maintaining respectful distance as he gazed at the sleeping child. "My brothers, I mean," Marcus nodded. "Sarah says the same thing." An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with everything that could never be adequately expressed or resolved. The complicated weight of forgiveness, consequence, and the strange paths that lead from harm to healing. The research team at Walter Reed says the modified treatment protocol is showing remarkable results, Lucas finally offered. 91% effectiveness in reducing PTSD symptoms without any of the destructive elements of the original method. "I know," Marcus replied. "I'm scheduled to speak to their test group next month." "For them," Marcus clarified, his voice firm but not hostile. "For the men and women who come home carrying invisible parasites of a different kind." Understanding passed between them, an acknowledgement that redemption was neither simple nor complete, but perhaps possible in small increments over time. "Your brother would be proud," Marcus added after a moment. "Not of what you did to me, but of what's come from it. Ryan always wanted to heal things, not break them." Lucas's eyes glistened as he nodded, unable to speak for several seconds. After collecting himself, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, worn metal object, an Army Ranger pin that had belonged to his brother. "I thought maybe when he's older," Lucas held it out tentatively. "So he knows who he's named for, what kind of man his namesake was." Marcus hesitated only briefly before accepting the offering with his scarred hand. "Thank you," as Lucas walked away. Sarah joined Marcus at the water's edge, slipping her arm around his waist. "You okay?" "Getting there," Marcus replied honestly, tucking the pin safely into his pocket, a tangible connection between past and future. Together, they watched the sun begin its descent toward the horizon, painting the Pacific in shades of amber and gold. Little Ryan stirred against his father's shoulder, making the soft sounds of a child completely secure in the knowledge that he was protected and cherished. "You know," Sarah said softly, "for all the medical explanations about parasites and neural pathways and tissue regeneration, I still think the most important healing happened here." She placed her hand over Marcus's heart. Marcus nodded, understanding the profound truth in her words. The physical scars on his arm would always remain, visible reminders of trauma and recovery. But the deeper healing, the ability to hold his son with an arm once nearly lost, to look at Lucas' tours and feel something more complex than hatred, to sleep through the night without reliving the desert mountains of Iraq. That was the true miracle. "Some wounds never fully heal," he said, echoing words from his speech. "But they remind us that we're strong enough to survive the unimaginable, and sometimes they guide us toward what matters most." As if in agreement, baby Ryan opened his eyes, reaching up with perfect trust to touch the scars on his father's arm, not with fear or revulsion, but with the simple curiosity of a child who saw only his father. Battle marked but undefeated, wounded but whole. In that gesture lay everything Marcus had fought for, everything he had survived to witness. The promise of a future unbound by the wounds of the past, where scars tell stories not of defeat, but of endurance and the unbreakable bonds that hold us together, even in our darkest hours. Life writes its story on our bodies and in our hearts. Every scar, every line, every moment of unbearable pain that somehow didn't destroy us becomes part of who we are. Marcus cradled his son with an arm doctors once thought he would lose, understanding what all survivors eventually learn. True strength isn't found in perfection, but in what remains after the storm has passed. The parasites that had invaded his body mirrored the invisible wounds so many veterans carry home from war. Unseen, burrowing deep, profoundly life-altering. Yet through his ordeal, Marcus discovered what many learn only through suffering: that healing often comes from the most unexpected sources, that forgiveness can coexist with justice, and that our greatest purpose may be teaching the next generation that being wounded isn't the end of our story. In the gentle way, baby Ryan touched his father's scars without fear, seeing them not as evidence of brokenness, but as proof of survival. Lay hope for all who bear the marks of battles fought and survived. Some stories end not with erasure of the past, but with its transformation into something that can nurture rather than destroy, heal rather than harm, connect rather than divide. Marcus Rivera had gone to war as one man and returned as another. But in the end, it wasn't the battlefield that completed his transformation. It was a hospital room, a tiny son, a scarred but functional arm, and the hard-won understanding that survival and healing are not the same thing, but both are necessary for a life fully lived. Thank you for spending this time with Brad Arrows. We hope the stories whispered through the rain carried you far into your imagination or your dreams. If you're still awake, let us know how you liked the journey. Until next time, stay safe, sleep well, and let the darkness comfort you.